Good evening, friends. Good evening. Oh, starting off so sweet. Happy holidays. Thank you, JRL Studios, for the 1999. Happy holidays to you, Paul, and the adorable demons. They are demons. I'm up to my fake tits and sewing orders, so I won't be commenting a lot, but I'm looking forward to listening in. Love your fairy drag mother, Jay. Thank you, Jay. You're so sweet. Happy holidays to you. Happy whatever you celebrate. It's okay to say Merry Christmas. It's okay to say other things. There's no war on Christmas. Because it's the holidays, I will be drinking this cocoa cream wine cocktail from Trader Joe's. I love Trader Joe's. This is actually really good. It's kind of like if Bailey's was chocolate instead of not chocolate. It's a 14.75% ABV, so just about the strength of a wine. Less strong than Bailey's, but a little stronger than your average wine. Interesting. It says wine cocktail other than standard orange wine with natural flavors and artificial. Other than standard orange wine? I've had some of it. As you can see, it doesn't taste orangey at all. It just tastes chocolatey. Yes, since we were reading a nonfiction book this month, there wasn't really any alcohol in it, unless you count the Victim beer. But as we don't have any of that on hand from 1995, I don't know if I would drink it even if we did. Cheers! Happy holidays! Seasonal cocktails, which you don't have to mix because they come pre-mixed. Thank you, Trader Joe's. We are... Ooh, that's a bit of a bite to it, doesn't it? It says you're supposed to have it over ice, but I don't really like ice. Like, I'll have like a giant ice ball, but not like ice cubes, so I'm drinking it. It was cold, it was in the fridge, but it's bitier than I remember. So, yes, Hanukkah ended tonight, so that holiday is over. On to the next one. Hope everyone had a joyous family time. Welcome to the Vampire Book Club, where we read one vampire-related book a month. And usually we've always read fiction. This time we chose to read nonfiction. People have been asking for nonfiction for a while. I have a ton of nonfiction vampire books over on my vampire bookshelf. And it was time to finally read one. I had sort of put it off a bit because a lot of the nonfiction books I have are people's like academic essays, which are only published through like university presses, so they're a bit more expensive, they're more obscure, they're harder to find. But people voted, actually, of the four I put up, they voted for the most obscure and hard to find one. There was no ebook version, there was no audiobook version, there was only a paperback, but people wanted to read it, and it won the vote, and they bought it, and they read it. At least I think a few of you bought it and read it, because a few of you were talking about it in book club, but I know we probably had much fewer participants this time, and that's okay. That's why I'm here to tell you about the book, because if you didn't read it, you don't have to. The book, of course, was The Lure of the Vampire, Gender, Fiction, and Fandom from Bram Stoker to Buffy by Millie Williamson. You think that's a mouthful? You should read some of the academic language in here. This is a very densely written academic cliche style book. It is not very accessible to people who don't have a lot of academic vocabulary under their belt. I didn't find it boring or tedious like I do some academic papers that are even on subjects I like, so it's definitely not the worst in that arena, but I could imagine that a lot of people who aren't used to this style of writing might have been frustrated with this book, so if that's why you didn't read it, I understand. I am here to sum it up for you in layman's terms, lay vamps terms. This book came out in 2005, and it is a study of gender in fandom, specifically women in fandom, in vampire fandom specifically, and why vampire fandoms compared to other types of fandoms are so predominantly feminine. A lot of fandoms that the author mentions that you look at, like science fiction fandoms, are boys clubs, and women in those fandoms are often on the outskirts and have trouble being part of it unless they're seen as one of the boys. But vampire fandoms, very different. Vampire fandoms have a much higher percentage of women, especially in the early 2000s. And I'm sure there are other exceptions. You know, I know there were a lot of women in Star Trek fandom, but you still look at a lot of those nerdy sci-fi cliquey culture fandoms as dominated by cishet white men. And vampire fandom is not that at all. So, the cover is not holographic, it's just printed on interesting paper. Is the audio soft? Should I turn it up? Before I continue, please let me know. We should definitely check out our technical difficulties. The audio is soft. All right. I'm going to do this. Is this better? I gotta wait because there's a lag in the chat. Is this better? I'm talking just a little better. Okay, we can make it a lot of better. Should I make it more loud? Is that better or is that too loud now? Okay, great. We'll take it. We'll take it. All right. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I was recording a video today, so I had this microphone over there where I record my videos, which I will not show you because it is a mess after I'm done recording a video about my books, right? I'll pick up the book out of the stack, I'll talk about it to the camera, and then I will set it on the floor. And by the end of recording the video, I just have this huge heap of books all over the floor. And it's quite a mess. And if you saw it, you'd be like, no, those books, those poor books. But it was nice because I already had my makeup on, so I could just like roll into this live stream. So this book came out right before Twilight existed. It does not factor in Twilight fandom at all. It mostly focuses on Buffy fandom, Dracula scholarship, and Anne Rice fandom, which was a surprise to me. I was sure Anne Rice would be mentioned because how could she not be? The fandom is huge. I am in that fandom. I've been in that fandom since I was 16. I am a very long time, not just Anne Rice fan, but Anne Rice fandom person. It is my fandom. Phantom of the Opera used by my fandom. Not anymore. Anne Rice, Vampire Chronicles. I'm in this fandom. She was talking about me. She was talking about my people. But she was talking about like the Gen X era of the fandom. The people she was interviewing in 1998 were, adults with careers and marriages. In 1998, I was a sophomore in high school. I had actually just discovered Vampire Chronicles. That's probably right when I joined the fandom for the very first time. Yep. Wow. No, I'm still a Phantom fan, but I'm not really in the fandom. Like, I'm in one Phantom of the Opera Discord server, but I don't, post Phantom of the Opera meta essays on Tumblr anymore. I only peek at that Discord server once in a while. I don't go to, other fandom communities for Phantom of the Opera anymore the way I do with Vampire Chronicles. I am in half a dozen Vampire Chronicles communities. It is my, living. This is what I do every day. I wake up in the morning, I talk about Vampire Chronicles. Vampire Chronicles, last thing I do before I go to bed. It's my fandom. And I used to be that way about Phantom of the Opera, but not lately. Phantom of the Opera is just not gay enough, I guess. I know some people really like to make it gay, but it's not there. Speaking of gay things, so Vampire fandom, she starts off talking about how you look at Dracula, right? People see Dracula as the origin of vampire popularity. Yes, Dracula wasn't the first vampire, and she definitely gives lots of props to Lord Byron as the first vampiric essence, and then Polydorus the vampire based off Lord Byron, and then Carmilla, of course. But Dracula, she sort of goes in about how most of the target audience and fans of Dracula were middle-class white men. And all of Dracula's scholarship that's prevalent looks at Dracula from the perspective of the people who are like the heroes in Dracula. So Jonathan, Quincy, Arthur, Van Helsing, Seward, middle class or upper class white men who are heroes here to save the day. Dracula is a force of evil. He is not sympathetic. He is not relatable. It is the heroes here to save the day. And, the audience that it was speaking to who would identify with those people is a very certain class of people. But she goes on to talk about, what about all the other people who are reading Dracula? The working class, the women, the lower class, the non-white people. They had a reaction to Dracula as well that does not get talked about in literary analysis very much. We mostly focus on how Dracula is symbolic for the white middle class and what it represented, the fears that Dracula was, you know, the sexual repression, the xenophobia, and all of that. But what did Dracula mean and resonate with these other classes of people? How would women have responded to Dracula, the book? We know how women respond to Dracula, the movie. They were throwing their panties at Bela Lugosi. They were writing him love letters all the time. But Dracula, the book, when it came out, she's looking at, there aren't texts of working class people and poor people's reactions to Dracula. They don't exist because people didn't keep records of that, right? It was the rich white guys that got the records kept. History is written by the winners. What are you saying? Okay. I don't know what's going on in the chat right now. So her view of how other types of people might have reacted to Dracula is from a very gendered perspective. She talks about how Dracula as a vampire is not seen as sympathetic in any way whatsoever. But there is a vampire who is, and that is Lucy. And scholars focus on the slaying of the vampire Lucy as one of the most prominent parts of the Dracula book, as like the part that's studied the most, the part that's discussed the most. So the slaying of Lucy. And for middle-class white men looking at this, they see these heroic white men being shown by Van Helsing that Lucy is no longer a person, she is an other, she is an it, she is a creature, and they dehumanize her, and that's how they're able to destroy the body of this woman that they love. And it's only by dehumanizing her that they're able to do that, and they see themselves as justified in doing the right thing to do that. What is going on in the chat right now? Do I have to start muting people? Maybe I need a mod today. Anyone want to be a mod? So the people reading the book who might sympathize with Lucy would see it in an entirely different context. She talks about how at the time there was this widespread fear of your corpse being dissected by anatomists, by medical students, of being grave robbed and your body being desecrated in a way that was just really abhorrent to them. Like, to me now, I think like, yeah, I'll donate my body to science when I die. It's cheaper than a funeral. Please let me serve science. But back then it was just seen as the worst thing, a fate worse than death. Just like how Lucy becoming a vampire is a fate worse than death. Having your body desecrated after death was a fate worse than death, and spoke to the fears of the poor. Rich people didn't have their bodies desecrated after death. It was the poor that got their bodies either sold to the anatomists or grave robbed. And them seeing Lucy's body destroyed this way spoke to that fear that they had. So instead of identifying with the white heroes, they're seeing the white heroes as the villainous characters. And they're identifying with Lucy. Lucy is the sympathetic vampire, the person that they see themselves in that place. And that was the beginning of this other gendered viewing of Dracula. Meanwhile, people aren't, lusting after Dracula as a character. He is just this pure evil character. But when we look at vampires as romantic, as sexy, as desirable, okay. I am going to mute this person. Bye. How can I make you a temporary? Okay, you are a temporary mod, Alexis. Thank you for volunteering. They also talk about it in terms of, gendered persecution, the way women were seen as second-class citizens, and all these other things. But we look at Polydorus the vampire. His vampire isn't like Dracula. Lord Maven is very sexy. He's very charismatic. He's a seducer. He not only seduces the protagonist's sister and, ruins her by murdering her, but, it's the analog of the rakish man ruining the innocent maiden. But he also pretty much seduces the narrator. Like, there's definitely some homoerotic stuff going on there. He is this Byronic figure because he was literally based on Lord Byron. But even before he existed, Lord Byron had been writing these kind of heroes. And she talks about how the very like angsty, broody, sexy, dark, bad boy heroes Lord Byron was writing, he eventually became, when he got ostracized from society, he eventually became the characters he was writing. He became this cult of personality. People were just obsessed with him. Yes, he was like, he could not show his face in polite society, but people still thought he was hot. And then you move on from that to, you have Carmilla, which is an entirely different gender interpretation. Like, most people look at Carmilla and be like, it's a cautionary tale about the predatory lesbians coming to defile your innocent girls. But people who see Carmilla as more sympathetic, because she is a vampire with feelings. She's not doing it just to be evil like Dracula is doing it. She's doing it because she is in love, and she just can't help herself because she's so in love with Laura that she wants to eat her. So we do see her as a... Oh my gosh. Okay, I hope you're not also someone who needs to be blocked. We'll see. So we start getting these sympathetic or alluring vampire tropes, which Dracula was not. And then we move on into the modern age, and we get to things like Barnabas Collins in Dark Shadows, or even earlier, Varney the Vampire, who's again a reluctant vampire. And you start having this trope, even Carmilla had this trope, of vampires who are forced to be vampires against their will, who don't enjoy being vampires, who just want to be human again, in a way. And these are the vampires that start appealing to people, that people start becoming romantically attracted to. She's interviewing people and they're like, yeah, Jonathan Frid is Barnabas Collins. He wasn't attractive. He was not like a sexy heartthrob, but people really fell in love with him just because of the pathos of his character. And she starts talking about how we get this idea of what the vampire means in popular consciousness. You get up to Anne Rice's vampires and all the other sort of reluctant vampire tropes that come along. So you have the sexy allure of the creature of the night, but it's okay because he didn't choose to become a creature of the night. He was forced into it and he feels bad about it. He still has all those cool powers. It's this dichotomy of sympathy and attractiveness that she says women, but you know, people of that persuasion are drawn to. And this book is very, I don't want to say hetero-focused, but very binary-focused, very cis-focused. She does not address transness at all, or non-binary us at all. She does talk about bi people, but when she talks about how female vampire fans can like fall in love with each other through their vampire fandom when they thought they were straight before she refers to them as lesbians, she's not talking about any sort of gray areas of sexuality. So product of its time. If I sound like trans exclusionary when I talk about this book, it's because it is, but not in a malicious way. So I'm just going to say women because that's what she says. She talks about Lost Boys. So she says the idea, people, by the time Lost Boys came around, people had the idea of this sympathetic vampire in their heads, a sexy, alluring, bad boy vampire who also had a heart and a soul. So a lot of people in Gen X were in love with the Lost Boys and thought it was great, even though those vampires aren't sympathetic at all. They are almost purely evil. They don't really have personalities or storylines or plot or characters. But because it was so entrenched in our society as a fandom culture of vampires, of what we think a vampire is in our head, which is the Barnabas Collins, which is the Louis de Pointe-Lac, that people watched the Lost Boys and saw these bad boy biker outcast vampires and projected onto them the Byronic personality, projected onto them the Barnabas Collins. And the fans she's interviewing who say why they like Lost Boys, all of them agree they hate the ending, because the ending is when it brings it back to cheesy, campy, you know, we're just going to destroy the evil and the good guys win. And they talk about how much they enjoyed Michael's tortured soul as he's becoming a vampire, and what they really wanted was for him to actually become a vampire, because again, he doesn't want to be, he's resisting it, he's forced against his will, but then for him to actually go through with it instead of getting rescued from it would have been what those fans wanted. So a lot of people like Lost Boys emotionally because they have projected this idea of, she calls the star vampire. The vampire is like not in certain character, but like this idea of the movie star, the superstar, the star vampire concept that we have in our head of like what a vampire should be in a romantic sense. And yes, this is very much debated. A lot of people are like, no, vampires should just be mean and evil and personless, and they shouldn't have feelings, and that's hotly debated. But she doesn't go there. She just focuses on what the people she's talking about think vampires should be. Alexis, could you mod the person who's being annoying, please? The 87, whatever is that. Yeah. So she goes through all of that and talks about how the heroes to the people who are normally seen as the audience for vampire movies are actually the villains to women, to sympathetic feminine feelings people, because they identify with the vampire and they see the Van Helsings trying to kill them as the enemy instead. The horrible doctors who just want to dissect your body after you die and unperson you and start calling you an it just because you get sexy. And she goes on to talk about chapter 2, vampire transformations, gothic melodrama, sympathy, and the self. So she talks a lot about melodrama, not in a derogatory or disparaging way. She talks about the functions of melodrama, how it all has to do with heightened emotions and heightened feelings, and how vampires naturally fit into that. Vampires offer this sense of identity that is very much over the top and melodramatic, and that doesn't mean it's bad. Melodrama does have a connotation to it, but she doesn't even refer to it that way at all. Yeah, she also talks about Near Dark when she talks about Lost Boys as well, about how you have this guy who's brought into the vampire cult, this vampire family that seems really cool, and a lot of the audience just kind of wanted him to be that and become that, even though he didn't want to, and that makes it okay. But then she talks about how like heteronormativity saves the day for both Michael and the other guy, and like, she says that a lot of people talk about the homoerotic subtext between Michael and David in The Lost Boys, but that doesn't even really matter. You can see it as Michael having a gay panic moment in his teenage years, a metaphor for like, I almost thought I might be gay, but then I got over it and I returned to the masculine patriarchy, just where I was supposed to be. And that kind of is the moral of Lost Boys, and that's why a lot of people don't like the ending. But there's like cool stuff in there in the middle that we like. I've never liked The Lost Boys. Like, I don't hate it or anything, but it's never been my kind of vampire movie, because I am looking at it as a whole, and I am not projecting anything onto it. I am just saying what's there and what's not there. So when it comes to the self in chapter 2, she's talking about how as culture went from, you know, the 1800s and the 1900s as vampire fiction was developing into the 20th century, we started becoming a much more capitalist society. And back in the oldie times, people's identity usually revolved around a religion. Like, you were a Christian, you had a church, you had a culture, you obeyed the rules, you had a certain way, a set of life. But as we get to a more she calls it a secular society, or like a post-sacred society, that's what she calls it. And people start rejecting not just believing in God or whatever, but the community of this is who I am part of this collective, and I believe in these rules. And we start developing this sense of self. And the capitalist ideal is you are a unique you. You are the only you there is, and that means you must be important. So capitalism can help you get important, but it's all delusionary. It's all a lie. The American dream is a lie, right? Like, you become part of the machine, you get used and used up, and then you are presented with this American dream of you will be unique and interesting and special, and then not given the chance to actually achieve that. It's like a false dream that the American dream sets you up with failure. Capitalism sets you up for failure. You will never find fulfillment in your sense of self. And because we don't have that communal, like, hive mind anymore as humans, we all think of ourselves as individuals in this society. It leads us to feeling very, like, othered and ostracized and unfulfilled. And you think, oh, I should be successful. I should be having the American dream. Everyone else around me is having the American dream, but I'm not. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? And this sort of sense of not fitting in, of being othered, is identifiable to the vampire, right? Who feels othered because he is literally other from humanity, but he also wants to be human. He has this unfulfilled sense of, I want to be part of your world, but I can't because I'm a monster. So, sorry, I get too enthusiastic about my own. So this sense of frustration, of the expectations that are upon us, the promises that are made to us by society, and then the inability to actually achieve those things. It gives, like, everyone feels like an outsider. Everyone feels like an other. Everyone feels like they're faking it. Like, you know, that the nerd kids in high school look around like, oh, all the like popular kids. But the popular kids feel that way too. Everyone has their dark secrets, right? We are all in a horrible state of capitalist existence, and it's only getting worse and worse and worse. So in that sense, people who are normally feel othered, who feel they are repressed by the American dream, especially women, because she talks about how in the 90s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, with the women's movement and then the civil rights movements, women were promised the sense of equality. We are all equal now. Women have the right to vote. They are equal. You are equal. You have every opportunity. Even you, a girl, can be anything you want. But it's a lie, right? Like, sexism still very much exists. Gender oppression exists. The wage gap exists. And we live in this false premise that women are equal, but in actuality, they are not. So that's why women especially will relate to the vampire, the sympathetic vampire, the star vampire that has come into our consciousness. And will project this idea onto other things. What's the next chapter? We got Gender Dracula, the Gothic melodrama. Fans rereading The Vampire, issues of gender and the pleasures of pathos. I think we already talked about that. Yeah, the reading of the vampire and the projection of the vampire. There's so much to this book. Yeah, she talks about how Dracula became sympathetic. Dracula became the star vampire, the Byronic character, very quickly. Like, the Dracula from the book, we do not see represented much in vampire fiction. Because he's not like a great character. Like, he's not an interesting character. He's very shallow. He has no depths. You know, as a villain, as like a final boss, sure, but much media that is successful doesn't have shallow characters. It has characters with feelings. And they don't have to be like sad, weepy, woe is me feelings, but they still have to have something there. So Dracula, in most versions after the book, is given something more to work with. Like, you look at some of the Hammer films after Christopher Lee just started like phoning it in, because they're like, Christopher, we need you in this film. You have to be Dracula or we can't make money. And he's just, he didn't even have any lines. He just like shows up and then he goes, and it's just, you know, they are Hammer's best films. I'm sure they made money because he was on the poster, but people aren't attracted to Christopher Lee's Dracula. I mean, Christopher Lee is objectively hot. Like, people like him as a person, but him as Dracula, people think he's cool, people think he's iconic, but people aren't like swooning over him, right? There aren't fan fictions about him. He does not have the same romantic appeal as Gary Oldman did in this movie. So besides women just finding vampires hot and being like, ooh, sexy bad boy, he will kill everyone but not me, I'm the special one, he's my monster, which is very much a valid monster fucker love. She says that the vampire is inherently feminine. The vampire is symbolically female because he is the othered. So when you have this dominant, scary male figure who is preying on women, who is symbolically female in this sense because he is repressed by society the same way women are, that character with the female character makes it kind of lesbian at that point. And this is also a valid read. Vampire transformations. Melodrama of the vampire. She talks about how Louis and Lestat and Anne Rice's vampires are really played into that. They weren't the first. She makes us sure we very much know that Anne Rice wasn't original and didn't do it first. But they are very important because it got, you know, very widespread. I'm not saying it's not true that people viewed Christopher Lee's Dracula as a sex symbol. And like in certain movies, he definitely has a much more character than other movies, but like there's no fandom for him now. Like, look at the vampires that people are still writing fan fiction for, that people are still like romantically invested in, and he's not really one of them. He was a sex symbol in the sense that he was a vampire at all, and at the time when there weren't a lot of vampires to choose from. But she talks about the difference between him and Frank Langella as Dracula. So for a while, Christopher Lee was all people had, and this is a British author. She is a British book. So a lot of this is referencing British culture. So she definitely is much more familiar with Christopher Lee as Dracula than the others. But she also does do a lot of interviews in America with American vampire fans, especially in New Orleans. So she does sort of go both ways, but you have to remember that she is talking from a British perspective. Christopher Lee as Dracula was the only vampire they had in Britain on like TV that they could access easily for a while. So just him as the vampire symbol, yes, very sexy. But once they started having more of a widespread access to vampires with feelings, they all kind of pushed him aside for those instead. And Frank Langella as Dracula was the first Dracula that was really very romantic, very seductive, not just in body with his like Fabio shirt open and his hair blowing in the wind, but just, you know, he was very much like Gary Oldman's Dracula. He was very feelingsy, and people loved him. And a lot of the interviews she do, everyone's like, yeah, you know, Dracula was whatever, but then there was that Dracula, and that changed everything. And all the Gen Xers she's talking to just were here for Frank Langella. There's so much in this book. I definitely won't be able to get all of it. I am a bad book club leader in that I don't make notes, but I do have a good memory, so I'm going to do my best. So then she talks a lot about Spike. So this chapter is called How Spike Became a Vampire Star. So again, the vampire star is the projected idea that audiences have of what a vampire should be and why the vampire is attractive, because he is dark and evil and sinister and powerful and a power fantasy, but he also didn't want to be that, so it's okay. So Spike starts off as very shallow, very unsympathetic in Buffy, and he was originally supposed to be killed off, but because people responded to him so well, largely in part to his humor, which gave him a personality beyond the other vampires in Buffy. And with Buffy, it's hard because vampires in Buffy don't have personalities because they don't have souls. And being a vampire in its very nature makes them inhuman. So seeing vampires as like a symbol for outsiders and humanity doesn't really work in Buffy because they're like completely stripped of their souls, except for Angel. Obviously, he is the entire like crux of that story. So Spike is a vampire without a soul. He does not have... Sorry, why did my light go off over here? Uh-oh. What did I do? Sorry. My monitor just went off, so now it's dark in here. Hope you don't mind. Anyway, back to Spike. The important things. How do I get this back on? Is it this one? Is it this one? Is it this one? Okay, I guess this monitor... Oh, there it goes. Sorry, I use my monitors as a light source. So because Spike had a sense of humor, fans gravitated toward him. That made him different than the other vampires in the background on Buffy and made him stand out. And he also loved, right? He was in love with Drusilla. He was there for Drusilla. Everything he was doing was for Drusilla. So he had a motivation other than, I just want to take over the world. Like, you know, the Master of the Hellmouth and everything. So, Joss Whedon recognized the fan response to Spike, responded to it, didn't kill him off, kept him alive, and, you know, Spike became his own sensation. He became one of the most influential vampires in vampire culture. And he was very much inspired by Lestat, like that's no secret, which in turn then inspired vampires like Eric Northman, like there's Damon Salvatore, all like that trope of bad boy vampires. But she also talks about how Spike, when he does become soul inhibited and he does fall in love with Buffy, he essentially becomes a feminine figure because now he is not the dominant, powerful figure. The entire point of Buffy is the flipping of gender expectations, right? Buffy is this tiny, ditzy, blonde girl, but oh no, she's strong and powerful. That's different. Spike is this strong, powerful, bad boy, mean-ass vampire, but oh no, he has feelings. That's different. So she talks in one of the later chapters about how they switched the gender dynamics. Buffy is the rapey male figure and he is the sensitive, attacked female figure, but then how their gender like opposition comes back into form, because at some point like she does come back to her femininity, he does come back to his masculinity. It's this very like fluid gender flowy thing, and she has an entire section about slash fic. To her, slash fic means person/person, not necessarily gay, which is what it means to most people, but like Buffy/Spike is slash fic to her. And when she talks about that and how they are treated in fan fiction, and how Buffy and Spike in the show itself was essentially slash, like this show slashed itself by bringing that sexual fanficky element into it, and why Buffy was so popular with slash fickers. By slash she means any romantic sexual fiction, as opposed to gen. It's like slash or gen essentially in her brain. Is because there was so much like subtext allowed in Buffy that they kind of put in there as like ship teases on purpose, which just spoke to people who wanted to, you know, write stories about them having sex. But Buffy encouraged it. Buffy was there for it. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. The fanfiction chapter is the last chapter, though she does talk about Spike throughout the entire thing. So this fan's reading the vampires, talking about, okay, yeah, and again, so when Spike first came on the show as this like one-dimensional shallow character, just like with Lost Boys, fans projected that star vampire ideal, that conception of what a vampire is, onto him. Like they had Anne Rice and Barnabas Collins in their brains for so long that they see a character like Spike and they're like, oh, of course that's what he is. And then therefore he ended up becoming that. Like with Lost Boys, they turn off the movie before the last scene to keep that illusion in their minds. So, but Joss Whedon actually leaned into it and he's like, okay, I'll make him into that. Sure, that's what you want. That's what you get. So then there's a whole chapter about Buffy herself and how she is a slayer, is gender, and so on. She's not a vampire, so I'm skipping that. This author clearly has a lot of knowledge and passion about Buffy. She did all of her research about Anne Rice and fandom and fan clubs in the 90s, in 1998 and earlier. But much of this book is about Buffy and the ending of Buffy. This book came out in 2005. It ended in 2003, I think. So what she had written, and a lot of the sources she cites are from the early 2000s. So clearly she's been working on this a while. She may have had the stuff from the 90s set as an essay, but then came along with more ideas and compiled it into this. So it was kind of like two sides to this. Her pre-Buffy research and her like clearly Buffy obsessed research. You could tell she's very much a vampire fan. And she also talks about in her biography here that she came to academia late in her life, that she did not start as an academic, that she was a vampire fan first, who then went back to academia and became a vampire academic. So the next chapter is Vampire Fandom, Rebels Without a Cause, Theorizing Fandom in the Field of Cultural Production. So she talks a lot about this mind, this guy who wrote about culture in the 90s and 2000s. He has a French name that's hard to pronounce. Where is he? Bourdieu. Perhaps I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. So a lot of other writers and essayists about fandom will cite this guy. And one person she really talks about heavily is Jenkins, who you'll see cited in a lot of fandom-related academia. But she thinks Jenkins, going off this one guy, Bourdieu, got it wrong. So there's so much shade in this chapter towards Jenkins and some other people who also got it wrong and just didn't understand what Bourdieu was saying. They just didn't get it, man. And she corrects all of them. So the idea that Mr. B puts out is that in culture is about acquisition, and we as humans are like, the way we exist is trying to like gain status, right? Like trying to improve ourselves in life. And again, she says this is already reductionist in general, but he says there's two ways that people do this. You have the hegemonic way and the other way, starts with an A. These words are so long and confusing. I'm just a simple vampire fan. Anyway, so there's like cultural economy. And the hegemonic way has to do with things related to capitalism, to economics, to making a profit as a way to like gain progress in existence. And the other has to do with a way of gaining like social elevation. So when she talks about fandom, she says like there's different ways to be a fan, especially like with Buffy. The merchandising Buffy is a huge part of the fandom. People will buy that merchandise. They make so much money off of that merchandise. She talks about how like in merchandising sales in 1 year of all merchandise ever sold, Buffy was like number 4 of merchandise sales. I don't think she is judgy. She talks about a lot about other people's opinions, tells us what their opinions are, and then comes along and says, but I don't think that's true. I think maybe it's broader than that. I think it's less dichotomous than that. I think there's more to it than that. So I think she's okay. I didn't really disagree with her on much. But the guys that she's quoting are mostly men and saying that they don't understand the intricacies of fandoms because they're seeing it from a male, middle-class, white point of view. That's valid. So she's looking at Buffy fandom. So you have the fandom that is very much driven by, I'm going to collect the merchandise and then I will be more valuable because I can sell it later for a profit kind of thing. And then you have the people who's like, I'm just going to write fan fiction and I'm not going to make any money off of it. And that makes me a more pure fan than you. But also everyone on the internet reads my fan fiction and I'm the biggest fan in this fandom. So there's always this sort of like elevation crawl and people always want to be like at the top of something. Because again, it goes back to that capitalist lie of we have to be successful in some way. We have to achieve something that you're special and unique. And if you don't prove that constantly, then you have failed at existence because, you know, the American dream doesn't exist. So, she spends a lot of time explaining both sides of this. I don't know why she had to explain it like over and over again. And she talks about how people look at fandom and fans of things, and originally they were seen as kind of rebels, right? Fans are people who reject the mainstream. You know, they're the nerds that got picked on in school, but they held strong because they really like Star Trek. And they're the people that are just going to like resist the system, man. Yet they buy all the merchandise. So are they really resisting the system? So this idea of looking as fans as rebellious isn't necessarily correct. And the people who do look at fans, especially Jenkins, because he writes his book as from a perspective of like, fans get maligned all the time and we're always seen in a negative context as like weirdos, so I'm going to prove that fans are cool. And she thinks he kind of goes too far with it and tries to prove that fans are pure in their like fandom aspirations. But no, they do buy the merchandise. They do fuel the capitalist machine. And she's not saying that's bad. She's just saying you can't reduce it to that. And you can't say that fans are fans just for fandom's sake. Some may be, but a lot of them aren't. So, when it comes to vampire fans, looking at the fandoms as being rebellious doesn't really make sense because a lot of the vampire fans are coming to the fandom for a sense of community. Like, they did feel ostracized, but they're not rebelling against, like, I'm going to be on my own, I'm going to be individual. They're trying to find like-minded people. And when you look at internet fandom, especially, people will say, like, oh, internet friends that you make are more pure because, you know, you found each other through a shared interest, and it's not just like you're in a random neighborhood and you have to make friends with your neighbors and that's all you've got to work with. But she's saying that's also based in privilege because it takes a certain amount of privilege to have the internet in the first place. It's just a certain amount of privilege to like devote time to fandom. It takes a certain amount of privilege to be educated enough to do some of these things, you know? And so it's more like you're finding less diverse groups and you're finding like-minded people, because it's not just you're finding that people are fans of the same thing. They're probably a similar socioeconomic class, they're probably a similar ethnicity, they're probably similar like educational background. And the internet isn't actually making it more diverse, but the opposite. But that's not a bad thing. She's just saying that what he said wasn't correct. And with vampire fans especially, so vampire fans feel like outcasts, right? So why do they become fans of vampires instead of just like being outcasts without any like hobbies? because being a fan of vampires is rebellious and I'm sticking it to the man. Not really. Being a fan of vampires is more about finding, like, identity and community and trying to, like, you know, feel fulfilled. Because the vampire offers this idea of, if I could be this thing, I would be fulfilled. I understand it's impossible to be this thing because vampires don't exist, but in my fandom, I can fantasize about this. And I can fantasize about this way I could be fulfilled, that capitalism denies me, that the patriarchy denies me, so on and so forth. So, vampire fandom in the field of cultural production, a vampire fan club case study. Here we go. So the vampire fan club in question is the Anne Rice fan club. The case study is about my people, but my people before they were my people. So I learned so much dirt about the Anne Rice vampire Lestat fan club, ARVLFC, in this section. Oh my God. Most of this is about the Memnock Ball. Okay, so the vampire fan club, the official Anne Rice vampire fan club, would have a vampire ball every year. And they were just kind of doing their own things. They were just a group of fans. But then Anne Rice noticed them. And Anne Rice is like, I want to be involved. I want to host the vampire ball at one of my properties. And I want to, like, make money off of it and, be part of this. And I'll be there. And, they were like, great, yes, Senpai noticed us. And a lot of this is very much about Senpai noticed us. So in 1995, after Memnock the Devil comes out, they usually would theme the ball after whatever book came out that year. Because in that time, Anne Rice was writing one vampire chronicle a year. Or at least so on after that. So she hosts it at the orphanage that she bought, which is the setting for Memnock. She always set her books in whatever property she was at the time. And this orphanage has a capacity for 4,000 people, but they had 7,000 people show up to the ball. And 4,000 of them were paying ticket buyers, and 3,000 of them were invited guests who didn't have to pay, the elite, the people who were connected to Anne in some way. And those 3,000 people got all the benefits at the ball, and the 4,000 people who traveled from around the world to come to this ball, who bought the tickets, were treated like second-class citizens. And there's interviews with fans who went to this ball, and they had been planning it for a year. They designed their costumes. They spent 9 months working on their costumes, and they get there, and after 20 minutes, it's just so bad that they leave. And this huge disillusionment with the fandom, this idea of hierarchy in the fandom. So when she looks at the other studies of fandoms by Jenkins and so on, everyone who based their studies on Baudelaire, they're talking about fandom as an us versus them. Like, the fans are the others who've banded together to go against the normies who think we're freaks, and you know what, we're not freaks, we just have special interests. But it's not an us versus them, because there is this infighting in vampire fandom, especially because this is a focus on vampire fandom. And is that because it is a female-led fandom? She doesn't say it like, bitches, am I right? It's not like that at all, but she does mention that it's not as simple as that. It is, you look at fandom as this place where we can all be together, but in the Anne Rice fandom, in this fan club case study, there was so much problem stuff. And this hierarchy where you have the official fans, the people who are running the fan club, like anyone could join the fan club, but the people who were in charge of the fan club, the people who worked at the bookstore where the fan club was based, which was the bookstore where Anne did all her signings, so they had a direct line to Anne. They were the special ones. They were the chosen ones. Some of them even got to work with Anne personally. They treated the normal fans, the non-official fans, as losers, as freaks. Like, they were talking about the difference between the way they collect things. So the non-official fans would just collect anything. Like, they go to the bookstore and, like, get one of the boxes they threw out that used to have Anne's books, and they're like, I got a box that used to have Anne's books in it. Meanwhile, the people that worked at the bookstore in the official fandom, they were collecting, like, first editions that were signed by Anne, and they specifically asked her not to sign their name in it, just to sign her name, only because that made it more valuable. So to them, their social capital, their personal capital, was things that were monetarily valuable. They were on the hegemonist side of the cultural field, and the other people was like what was value to them. They collected like ticket stubs. But then we have the official fans looking down on these people because they would go to Anne Rice's house and steal the collar off her dog, rip the leaves off the trees, these very tacky things that they're like, oh, these people are just like so not cool. We're the real fans. And just this infighting between them all. So yeah, this club case study was so full of dirt. And there's so much, like, this chapter was fascinating. I know people in the Anne Rice Vampire Lestat fan club. They're not the same people that were in this book when they were writing about it. And as this book says, the fan club kind of dissolved and disappeared after a while because of all this drama. And it was around the time when Anne Rice said that she was done writing vampires. She was never going to write a vampire again. So, you know, why should we have a fan club anymore? And there were no more vampire balls. And then after she came back to vampires and was like, sorry about that, I didn't mean it. And the vampire balls started again, which was when I went to my first vampire ball. The first one was in 2013. I went in 2014. Then we had a new generation of the fan club, and now the fan club is doing great. So hopefully it's not the same anymore. I have never noticed an us versus them, the elite fans versus the plebeian fans thing going on. I've been going to the Anne Rice Vampire Lestat fan club vampire ball for the past 3 years. I did go in 2014, but then started going again 3 years ago. I think it's better now, but then again, I am a stupid optimist who always looks on the bright side of everything, so take what I say with a grain of sunshine. Right, I'm so goth. Yeah, I could talk all night about this vampire fan club chapter, but I'm going to move on. The next chapter was about fashion, about how women vampire fans express themselves through fashion. I know there's plenty of man vampire fans who very much do the goth aesthetic, but she's specifically focusing on vampire fans only, not goths in general. Like, goths are goths, and it's very much men and women together. But vampire fans who aren't goths in the sense that they're in the goth scene with the goth music, they just dress in that style. That's what she's focusing on, and she talks about their sartorial practices. Sartorial is just an academic word for fashion. And she talks about how they say that they don't feel like other women. They reject the modern ideas of femininity. It's not that they think femininity is bad. It's just the modern idea of femininity doesn't fit them. So they keep associating modern femininity with pink, with ruffles, with high heels, or like teeny, like kitten high heels. And to them, their idea of a more feminine femininity is Victorian ball gowns. Black, of course. And they all wear black. They go out in fangs, they go out in contacts, and they talk about how they come home from their day job and they're like scrubs from their nursing position, and they strip it all off and they put on their Victorian ball gowns, put on their white makeup, put on their fangs and contacts, and will just like go out on the town. Now they're their true self. And they have to put on their fake face for their day lives, but then for their night lives, they can like put on their true self and become the vampire. They don't believe they are vampires. They're not, but they all wish they were. They all wish they could be. These are the female vampire fans who express themselves through fashion as not a rejection of femininity, but as a rejection of a current type of femininity, and the second wave feminism in particular. That was an interesting chapter. I did think it kind of went on too long. Like, a lot of the time she's just like, and here's an example of this, and this person says the same thing, and this person says the same thing, and this person says the same thing. So my conclusion is this. I was like, you could have concluded that 10 pages ago. But it was a cool chapter. She does have a lot of interviews with women who dress in that way and why they feel empowered by dressing that way, and how even though people will stare at them in the street, she says it's a weird dichotomy, right, between I don't fit in, I'm a misfit, so I'm going to stand out to get attention, but the attention I get will be negative, so it will keep people away from me. So I'm putting on this gothic outfit and I'm going out in polite society, and people look at me and they're kind of afraid, and I'm like, yes, stay away, do not approach. And this gives them some sense of their true self. So it's this weird sort of like back and forth between I don't fit in, I don't belong, nobody likes me, so I'm going to wear goth clothes and stand out and then make people not like me on purpose, and that makes me feel powerful. But then they also have their community with each other, and a lot of them have found like romance through this as well. And just the way she talks about how it's like not as like clear one-sided or two-sided, there's always a sort of like double layer to it, was really interesting. And most of the things when she's like beefing with the other scholars and throwing shade at them is how they're only focusing on like one reading instead of looking about like, actually it's more complex than that. It's a lot more complex than that. I thought that was cool. And the last chapter is about fan fiction. rewriting the vampire, gender, sexuality, and fan fiction. So she does mention briefly how, oh, thank you, JRL Studios, for the $1.99, not a phase, Mom. No, it's not. She does talk briefly how straight women who write male fan fiction do it as their way of feeling empowered to be attracted to men without having to be afraid of men. But as I said, this is very cis-focused, is very trans-exclusionary. I don't think she even realized how many people that seem to be straight women writing male fan fiction aren't actually women. Certainly aren't straight. Not that there's anything wrong with straight women doing that, and those whole reasons are valid, but there is a much higher percentage of people who write male fiction who are assigned female at birth who aren't actually female. And that's how we live our wish we would be lives, right? But she also talks about, she mostly focuses on Buffy fanfiction because that's where her area of expertise is. She does mention Anne Rice fanfiction sometimes. Oh my god, the beef with that. But in her focus on Buffy fanfiction, she focuses on the Buffy Spike fanfiction, which she calls Slash, as a way for women to be put in sort of a masculine role as Buffy, and then as a feminine role as Spike, because he's usually the weak one in that, you know, it's sort of this like dom sub situation where Buffy is all the powerful and Spike is always the weak one. He's very feminized, not in a bad way, not that that's degrading for him, but in a way that women can relate to, in a way that they can express their sexuality in a way that feels safe for them. And she does talk about people that were in role-playing groups for Anne Rice fandom, and she interviews this one couple who were role-play partners on this like email list where one was role-playing Armand and the other was role-playing Marius, and they eventually fell in love and then met in person and got married and moved to New Orleans together to live as glorious lesbians. And they had both thought they were straight before until they made this connection through their role-play as these male vampire characters to realize that they were lesbians and lived happily ever after, which is definitely an experience I have had with fan fiction and role-playing as male characters in vampire fandom. This is very much a thing. Most people I know's gay awakening was through fandom in some way, which is awesome and sweet. She talks also about how there's this gatekeeping in the zine culture of fandom, about how in the early days before like AO3 and fanfiction.net existed, the only way to like get your fanfiction read was to get it accepted in a zine. But the true fans, the elite fans who were just doing art for art's sake, would only accept certain fics into their zines. And there's again this fan hierarchy. It wasn't just like, hey, we're all fans of weird stuff and we're the freaks and we're against the normies over there with their sports and stuff. In the fandom, so much infighting, flame wars, mailing lists exploding, people thinking I'm a more important fan than you because I only care about the art and you care about making money. Or I'm a more important fan than you because like I got a professor career out of this and I've actually made a living and, you know, I'm not living paycheck to paycheck like you are. And there's these different ideas of what's important and how your fandom can fulfill you in life, right? And the sense of elitism. And she talks a lot about like bourgeois ideals. There's a lot of bourgeois in this. Yeah. It's interesting. She's not really sort of making a statement on any of these things or saying anything is good or bad. And like even when she presents like both sides of, she interviewed people in the Anne Rice fan club, one on the elite side that like we're better than those normie fans, and one on the normie fan side was like those guys are assholes and, you know, gatekeepers. And she didn't condemn either of them. She didn't pick a side. She just presented both sides to us. And she does give names for everyone. And I wonder if they're fake names or if she put their real names, because then I can go to the people in the Anne Rice fan club right now and be like, do you know this D person? Like, do you remember her? Yeah. So her conclusion of it all is that the capitalist modern society we live in has given us an idea that the self is the most important, but also presents us with a setup to failure existence of how we will never feel fulfilled and satisfied in ourselves because the measures of success are impossible to achieve. Back in the sartorial chapter about fashion. She talks about how feminine ideal is impossible to achieve and how people, like, there's no way to win at being a woman. And it's just like there's this idea of what you have to be considered like hot or sexy or appealing, but not too hot and sexy because that's not appealing. And it's just impossible to achieve. So women are automatically set up for failure. And as vampire fandom is very female-led or very led by feminine ideas, like not necessarily people who are women, but ideas that are associated with the feminine, right? That we're all set up for failure. And vampires offer us this icon to self-actualize. We can look at the vampire, especially the reluctant vampire who didn't want it, but he got it anyway, and see this idealized self of someone who is on the margins of society, just like us, someone who is rejected by society, just like us, but who is proud and individualistic and so cool that he doesn't even need modern society. He's better than modern society, but yet he feels sad about it, just like I do. But he's also, immortal, and he has all his life, and he can live forever, and you'll be dead and boring, but he'll still be living beyond you. And it's just this idea of the vampire is this cosmic ideal for femininity of what a triumph would be over this horrible capitalist patriarchy that we live in. I thought that was really interesting. I left out tons of stuff. So much stuff. There's so much more in here. It's a very dense read, but I did read it very quickly. I read it in 2.5 days. I didn't think I'd finish in time for tonight because last night I fell asleep this far in, a little more than halfway in. I was like, there's no way I'm going to finish this tomorrow and film a whole video and go to the post office and run errands, which I had to do today. But I did. I finished it. So, is readable, especially when I started getting into things that I cared about a lot, like the beginning chapters with Dracula and stuff. I care about Dracula. I'm really interested in Lucy, but it was just sort of I've read all this before. This is really dry and dense, and I can't. But once she started talking about the Anne Rice, I was like, do tell me more about the drama, please. I would recommend this book to absolutely any Anne Rice fandom person, not the casual Anne Rice fans. The people who are in the fandom like me, if you know me on Tumblr, you're in the fandom, right? If you're on AO3, you're in the fandom. Definitely recommend it for the dirt. And just for her ideas. There were a lot of ideas in here that I was like, I never thought about that that I thought were interesting. And most of the things that she was kind of refuting that other scholars do were those much more shallow reads, or those much more, fandom is a collection of friends who are going up against the mainstream because we don't have to be mainstream. No, fandom is a complex place with its own social dynamics and its own sense of what cultural capital is and what achieving significance in my life as an actualized individual is, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Good book. I liked it. I'm glad I read it. I am very glad I read this one. I put up 4 nonfiction books. The others were more mainstream, more published in a way that you could easily buy, whereas this is a tiny wallflower film and cultural studies publication. It's from an academic press in the United Kingdom, so not so accessible in America, and it is 20 years old by now. This was the re-release issue in 2011. The original version came out the same year as Twilight, before Twilight was a thing. So of course they re-released in 2011 after the Twilight boom, when they're like, hey, maybe we can make some more money, and maybe more people will want to buy this now that everyone's thinking about vampires, especially girly vampires. Yeah. Good book. Thank you for choosing it, book club. I was a little reluctant for you to choose this. I was hoping you were going to choose one of the other ones. Mainly because I thought it would be hard for people to get this one, and I wanted it to be accessible, but I'm glad. I'm very glad I read this. And thank you to the person who sent it to me. This was a gift from one of my Patreon patrons who has been very generous to me over the years and sent me very many gifts. So thank you for sending this to me. I finally read it. And I hope you're here watching this. You can see what I finally thought about it. I had it on my vampire wish list, which exists on Amazon. And he said, oh, I saw this thing on your wish list, and its title sounded cool, so I'm sending it to you as a gift. And I'm like, oh, well, thanks. So I haven't been keeping up with the chat, because I've been talking a lot. What time is it? What time is it? 9. I've been talking for an hour about this book. That's how you know it's interesting. Yes. So now I'm going to scroll up in the chat a bit, read what you said, see if there's anything to respond to. You are welcome to repeat any questions you had for me or any thoughts you want me to share about your feelings about this book, because it's easier for you to just repeat it than me trying to find it when I scroll up. Van Helsing is a great vampire movie. I don't agree with you. It's fantastic to not just describe what a fandom is like, but why it is that way. Yes, exactly. Like, she figured it out. She uncoded the fandom. Criticism is not a full condemnation. Exactly. Like, so many people will watch my videos, especially my videos about the interview with the vampire TV show, and I will critique things, or I'll say, this is different from the books, and therefore it means this instead of this. And I'm not saying whether that's good or bad. I'm offering zero opinion, and they think, like, you're trashing on it, you're hating it. People with so much jump to negativity, which is the opposite of what I always do, because I'm a cockeyed optimist. How did that happen? Scrolling up, scrolling up. I find this section on fandom fascinating, and that even if I left my church space, I will never get away from people with this mentality. Exactly. Like, even in a church space, you have the people who are like, well, I'm a better Christian than you are because you are not as pure as I am. You cook on Sundays. I was super into fanfic, and yeah, the zines, they were important if the person who held the copyright was opposed to fanfic. Anne Rice was opposed to fanfic for a long while. She was very possessive of her characters. She didn't want anyone else touching her characters. People would send her plot ideas all the time, and she released a letter. She's like, thank you for your feedback on my novels. I love hearing what you thought, but do not send me plot ideas. I have my own plot ideas. You should take those plot ideas, make up characters of your own, and write them on your own. People were too familiar with her, sending her what they think she should write, and that's why she hated fan fiction. She's like, no, these are my characters. I'm going to decide what they do. Do not tell me what you think they do. Do not write stories about what you think they do. Just stop. If she had more of a professional distance with her fans, I don't think she would have been as opposed to it. In 2012, she made a statement, only because she was interviewed, so clearly she had felt this much earlier than this, but in an interview they're like, hey, you used to hate fanfiction, and she's like, yeah, I did. I was afraid it would creatively block me. I was afraid people sending me their fanfiction would be like, no, now I can't do that plot because this person did it. But I realized how easy it was to avoid, so I'm not live and let live, write what you want. I don't get why you don't want to just write your own characters. Fine, maybe it's a stepping stone, maybe it's practice writing for you. So she's just pretty condescending about it, but she wasn't opposed to it anymore. She got around to the point where she's just like, feel free, write your fan fiction, it doesn't affect me. But back in the 90s, so in the chapter about the fan fiction and the people writing the zines, they knew Anne didn't like it. They knew how possessive she was of her characters, but she didn't do anything to make them stop. However, the people who were the official fans, the people who were in the fandom, who like could talk to her on the phone whenever they want, they would go on these websites where people were sharing the fanfic or role playing and be like, Anne doesn't like it, so you should take it down. You could get sued over this. And they started these huge flame wars on these websites. They would get these websites shut down. It wasn't Anne herself in the 90s. It were these other people who felt they were Anne Rice's mouthpiece, who felt they were better, they were more important fans than the casual fans and the fanficky fans, because they knew what Anne wanted and they could talk to Anne on the phone sometimes, and therefore they were here to make you feel like less of a fan because I'm a bigger fan than you are, and they just like destroyed the fanfiction communities. It wasn't Anne at that point. Anne did like get told to make fanfiction stop with the whole cease and desist thing after that point, later on in time. It was the asshole fans to start with. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Liddy Cal, for the $4.99. Thank you, everyone who ever super chats me in these book club streams. The Vampire Book Club is free. You don't have to pay for it. It is supported by my Patreon patrons, though I don't charge them for it. I charge them for my other videos, and therefore that trickles down to support the book club. So thank you to anyone else who wants to tip the book club. I really appreciate it. Toxic fandom is very much a thing that exists. Ah, my bracelet broke. Look, my bracelet broke. All the beads are falling off. That's what I get for fidgeting. I'm a chronic fidgeter. It's part of my, what I thought was ADHD, but no, I don't actually have ADHD. I just am autistic, and a lot of the symptoms are similar. Well, that bracelet's dead. When I took the ADHD test to see if I had it, she was like, no, you don't have problem concentrating in these areas and so on, but you are incredibly hyperactive. And I was like, really? I thought that was a part of the ADHD I didn't have. I thought I was just ADD maybe. And she's like, no, you have the hyperactivity. So my constant fidgeting is apparently a sign of that. My constant like brain worms and brain fidgeting is. Every fandom does indeed have its toxic fans. As a person who is currently in the Anne Rice fandom, a lot of toxic fans. And my circles in the fandom are very much people who are just like, about it, like, we don't get involved. We just sort of like look at it from afar. And sometimes people come for us because they don't like that we're not involved. But yeah, it's a thing. We see them, especially with the introduction of the TV show. It's this whole new realm of fans with different values and different, like, oh my god, YouTube is saying that ads will run shortly for some viewers. What? They're just going to run ads automatically? I'm sorry if you get an ad. I don't know how that works. Are you going to miss part of what I'm saying or what? I have no idea. Yes, me with my autistic hyperfixations and my obsessive collecting of items, including books. I am currently now fidgeting, now that my bracelet broke, with my Lestat Funko Pop, which someone sent me. Thank you. I never say the names of people who send me things because I never know if they want their names said or not. So there is no official Lestat Funko Pop because Tom Cruise forbids merchandise to be made of any character who he is ever played, and the person who owns the rights to make the Funko Pops is the person who owns the right to the Tom Cruise movie, so all Funko Pops would be made of that movie, which is Warner Brothers. So they can't make a Lestat Funko Pop. So the Funko Pops that came out recently, which were Louis and Claudia, don't include Lestat, never will. So I was talking about that on my last collections video, and someone was like, oh, you'll never have a Lestat Funko, will you? I'll prove you wrong. So this is one of those like hand edited Funkos from Etsy where someone will like repaint over a different Funko to make it into Lestat, and he's very cute and I love him. Yeah, YouTube has introduced all kinds of new features lately. A lot has been changing in the YouTube behind the scenes arena. Have I noticed a change in the fandom postmortem for Anne Rice? It's hard to say because postmortem from Anne Rice came at the exact same time as the TV show. There has been a huge change in the fandom since the TV show. I don't know what would have happened if the TV show didn't happen and she just had died and then fandom continued and I could see a change from that. There's no way to tell. But the introduction of the TV show fans, who aren't all like, only the TV show, not the books, but some of them are. But a lot of them are be like, I love the TV show, so therefore I'm going to read the books. It's still a hugely different environment, different social arena. The reason people like the TV show are often not at all similar to the reason people like the books. A lot of people say the TV show is good because it is so gay and the books were gay, but the TV show is more gay and it gives us the gay we actually really wanted, where the books were very coy about it. And that is entirely valid. That is not all my criticism, but that does not make the TV show better than the books. The writing in the TV show is atrocious. The TV show is full of plot holes. A lot of the character decisions make absolutely no sense in the TV show. The TV show turns Lestat into a cliche abuser, cycle of abuse. All the episodes are built around the cycle of abuse, right? That is not who he is in the book at all. I think that would very much hurt Anne's feelings if she was alive to see it, so I'm glad she's not. But it's funny because when the TV show is being made and when the creators, Roland Jones, and the writers of the episodes were talking about Lestat and what he does, they were talking about it as if he was so romantic. And he was offering Louis this chance at romance as a gay person and liberating from the heteronormative society to be free, to be gay as a vampire. And he rescued him and he gave him this life and opportunity. And the only bad part is killing people. No, he abused him into becoming a vampire. He, like, isolated from his friends. He, did all the classic abuser things. And the people who wrote this did not realize that. To them, this was romance. To them, this was wooing. They think Lestat's speech in the church right before he kisses Louis and Louis agrees to become a vampire was legitimately romantic, was not manipulative, was not abusive, was actually like, it's real and sincere and emotional and romantic. And if that's what you think romance is, sir, I would never want to date you. God. Yes, I agree. The show is more overtly sexual, but the reason people say it's better is because it's more gay. In my experiences, sometimes worse to have a fandom where the creator interacts with the fans because it's seen as fans trying to influence the creator. Oh my God, Anne Rice, that was her problem, right? She was too close to her fans. Even before Facebook, and she would joke about how obsessed she was with Facebook, or she'd be there on there every night talking to her fans, fighting with her fans, interacting with her fans, getting like praised by her fans, just like obsessed with this feedback loop from her fans. Even before that, she was way too involved with her fans. Like inviting fans to her home for the Memnock Ball, inviting fans to like come up to her tours. She did not have a professional distance from her fans, and it bit her. It came back to bit her so hard. Her fans felt super entitled to her, and then when they did not get what they wanted from her, they got mad at her, and it would just come back to bite. There was zero gratitude. The people who felt they had this like personal link to Anne and just like, oh, I'm one of Anne's special chosen ones, only cared about being the chosen. They did not care about her. They cared about making her like them. And that was one of the things that she talked about in this book, about how in this particular fan club, the fan club leaders were focused on Anne's needs and Anne's goals and what would make Anne happy, or what they thought would make Anne happy, right? They weren't focused on the fans. They weren't leaders for the fans. They were there to be with the author, to gatekeep the author, to be like, look, I'm a bigger fan than you are because I have Anne Rice's home phone number. It was in the phone book. Anyone could call her. But the book also talked about how Anne was her own biggest fan. Instead of just filling the role as a creator, she also filled the role as the biggest fan. When there were platforms, websites, forums, she would go on them and talk to her fans. Like when the movie came out in 1994, she went on there and was like, here's what I thought about Brad Pitt's performance. She was analyzing the movie like a fan would. So not only filling the position, and it talked a lot about filling the positions, how there's only so many positions in fandom to be filled, and certain people will claim them and take them, and then other fans are denied those positions. So not only was she filling the position as the creator, she was also filling the position as the number one fan. So therefore that position wasn't available to another person, and so on and so forth. Spike Buffy has domestic abuse. Spike Buffy has tons of abuse. And people thought it was hot. And that's allowed because it's fiction. This is fantasy. Fantasy can be strange. Do you know of any case where the fandom influenced the books? Any plot lines or characters? Well, I know of a case where fandom influenced a TV show. Like, wasn't that the huge problem with Game of Thrones, right? The fandom predicted what because, George R.R. Martin didn't finish the last books. So the last seasons of the TV show were the writers writing it on their own with input from him, but really writing it on their own. And the audience read it, guessed where they were going with it. And the writers were like, well, shit, now we can't do that. So we got to do something else. And what they chose else was stupid because it didn't make sense because they'd been setting up for the other thing for the entire show. And that influenced the show. And that's why everyone hates the last season, the last couple of seasons, because it's just, they're bad. They don't make sense. They don't work because the writers were like, well, no, we can't do the thing because you already predicted it. And we have to shock and surprise you because that's what we're known for, shocking and surprising you. So I don't know about that happening with books at all. you say Stargate SG-1 had some ship wars that got ugly because they tried to involve the producers. People are always in trying to involve the higher-ups. Like, people would go on Anne Rice's Facebook when she was still active there before she started having strokes and stuff and disappeared from the internet, and be like, hey, I think that Marius and Daniel were actually a romantic couple because of these few lines in this book. It's true they were a romantic couple, right? And she'd be like, read it for yourself and decide for yourself. Like, they go there trying to get her to validate their ships, and she wouldn't, thankfully. But that's kind of obnoxious, right? Them feeling entitled that they had this line to her, that they could do that. Like, where do you even get off? Write your own damn fan fiction about their romantic, because it's the books are the books. They are what's there. If you're writing fan fiction, if you're role playing, I do it all the time. That is my world. That is what I do. But leave Anne out of it. She does not want to hear it. She does not. The writer of Dune changed some things after the 80s movie because he liked was thus added to official lore. Oh, that's interesting. I don't think that was influenced by the fans, though, unless you count the makers of the movie as fans, which I guess they would be. Why else would they make the movie? They should have taken a leaf out of Rebecca Sugar's book. Fans guessed Rose was Pink Diamond, and it was planned. Then it was dragged out and was revealed. Boom! Validation. Yes, fans love validation. Like, if the Game of Thrones guys had just done the thing that everyone predicted, they would have cheered. They would have been like, yes, I was right. Look at me. I called it first. They would have been so happy. Your fans would have been so happy. But no, they had to be smarter than the fans. They had to be like, well, you guess this, we can't do that. And the fans were not happy. The fans were not happy. Do you want happy fans, or do you want to feel smart? No one's going to actually think you're smart. You're the only one who will. I don't know. Tough choice. Maybe just make your fans happy. Fans love being right and guessing. Like, yeah, I get as an author that it's kind of a bummer to have a thing that you think is going to surprise and shock everyone and someone calls it. I get that feeling. But you know what? If that happens, just deal with it and move on. If you're too shocking and too surprising because you didn't set it up enough, that's also bad. Like, the problem is you as an author are engaging with the fans and you're letting yourself see it. If you just stayed in your author world and wrote your books, you wouldn't have seen it and it wouldn't have bothered you. It would never have bothered you. Don't be too involved with your fans. Don't read the comments on Goodreads of your book. Don't read the reviews on Amazon. You're not supposed to do these things. You're not supposed to do these things. Don't be like Anne Rice. She was way too involved with her fans. It made her unhappy. She was not mentally well. She was not emotionally well. I have read her diaries. There's some really personal stuff in those diaries. She was not feeling good, you know? And imagine if she was feeling good. Imagine if she was like happy and like, wee! Imagine! Part of GRM's problem is that he writes so slowly the fans have a huge amount of time to theorize and down their predictions, and they get it really, really good at. I mean, that's true. That is very much true. And I am one of those authors, too. I take a long time. Like, as you have noticed, I released The Company of Death in 2019, and it's now 2023. And number 2, which is called The Touch of Death, is not out yet. Still working on it. Some authors take a while. If you were to predict what was to happen in that book, my bad. It'd be my fault for taking so long, right? The Company of Death, there will not be a love triangle involving Death and who else? Like, who else would be in the love triangle besides Death? I'm curious. I'm curious. Talk to me about my books. Talk to me about my books more. The 3 books are already plotted out and written. Nothing you say will make me change anything. If you predict something, I will not tell you if you are right or not. It is not bad if you've set something up well enough that fans guess. The fans that guess are maybe like 6% of the people who are going to read or watch your thing. That's generous. Trust me, most of the audience will still be like, mind blown. Pestilence is a spiteful ex. No, she's his sister. I mean, not that cosmic beings are above sister love. Death does have an ex. It is not Pestilence. Love triangle between Dracula, werewolf, and... I've never seen that written anywhere. Dracula, the werewolf, and the mummy. You know how Anne Rice wrote a book called The Mummy? So she loved the Universal Studios classic horror mummy movies. And when Universal was like, we kind of want to revamp the Universal monsters into a new generation, she was like, okay, guys, here's my idea. What if the mummy was hot? And she wrote a whole script for it. And Universal was like, nah, no thanks, we don't like your script. And then like 2 years later, they came out with the Brendan Fraser mummy movie, and it had a lot of the stuff in its screenplay that she had written in her screenplay. She was very much like, oh, there's nothing she could do. She turned her mummy book into a novel instead of a screenplay. But yeah, Universal ripped her off. Because what if the mummy was hot? You want a Carol and Death pairing? They both are inhuman creatures of logic. When and where are your books available? Well, my first book, The Company of Death, is always available. You can buy it on Amazon. You can buy it on any book website that sells books. If you want to buy it in person, it's not going to be in a regular bookstore. You could go to a convention where my publisher is and buy it from them in person. You could order it from me. I could give it to you if you want it like signed. That's the best way to do it. But then you have to pay for shipping. If you order it from Amazon, you get free shipping, right? It's on Kindle Unlimited. I think it was. I don't know if it still is. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read it for free. It's on audiobook. If you have Audible credits, you can use your Audible credit and listen to the audiobook. You've read 300 books since The Company. I know, it's been a while. I'm sorry. I'll tell you when the new book is coming, and then you can reread it to refresh yourself. Carmilla and who? Dracula, Carmilla, and Ruthven. I know she's their beard, maybe? She's their, like, dominatrix who's like, no, kiss. She'll watch from afar, I guess. I don't know anything about the Hell of a Boss Has Been Hotel series. I don't know anything about it. I've never even heard of it. I don't watch TV, so I don't see commercials, so I don't know when new things are coming, unless someone shares them in my server. If you want me to see things, share them in my server, because I always see those. So, as a Maven of the Eventide, the interview with the vampire show, yes, you mean the TV show? I've done a whole series on that, if you want to know my opinion. The series is on my channel. Why don't I put my next book as a book club choice? Because I don't want to talk about my own book. I don't want other people talking about my book. Go ahead, make it. Do it. Yeah, I've already talked about the TV show extensively. I have a lot of issues with it. There are things about it I do like, and I did actually enjoy watching it, except for some parts. But the fact that the TV show was so heavily promoted as being truer to Anne Rice than the movie was, of being something that Anne would love, of being so reverential to the books, and then not being that at all, felt like such a bait and switch, and I felt so betrayed that it kind of turned me sour against it. Oh, interesting. So yeah, after reading this book about gender and fandom and why women are so drawn to vampires, especially because women are naturally outsiders in society because feminism promised us equality and then didn't deliver it, is valid. But the interesting thing is that women are such fans of vampires, of a certain type of vampire, right? The sympathetic vampire. You know, this book focused on the vampire who was forced to be a vampire, who didn't choose it, who doesn't even want to be a vampire. But that's not true. I know women who are fans of vampires who love being vampires. As long as that vampire has some kind of like inner personality and isn't just a shallow mustache twirling final boss villain, women will like it. And I think that identifying with the vampire being symbolically feminine, because I too am an outcast because society has betrayed me. Yes, speaks to women. Also speaks to all kinds of other outcasts, obviously, too, right? There are plenty of outcasts who are not women who also identify with vampires. But this book was focused on gender, so yeah. I was so professional, in my opinion, of the interview with the vampire TV show. I was balanced. I was even. I gave context. And yet people were still so mad about me. They think anything that's not praising it is automatically saying it's horrible and you're bad for liking it. That's not what I said at all. I was very fair. There were things I was frustrated by. That was clearly my opinion. Oh my gosh. But you know what? No such thing as bad publicity, right? I'm glad when people watch my channel, even if they hate watch it. I'm very sorry that I am out of this cocoa cream wine cocktail. It's very tasty. If you like cream liqueurs, cheers with my red Amway goblet. Bunk. You prefer vampires who choose it? Well, you know what? Louis chose it. That's one of the things that I was confused about this book. She was like, Louis is forced into being a vampire. He doesn't choose it, and then he hates it. I was like, yeah, he hates it, but he chose it. Lestat gave him the choice like 3 times, and Louis chose it. I mean, the choice was between being a vampire or dying, but Louis wanted to die, so it's not like, well, I didn't have a choice because otherwise... No, he had wanted to die. He was actively seeking suicide. His invitation to suicide was open. He was like, muggers on the street, please come kill me. I want to die. And then a vampire answered his prayer instead, right? So he did want to die, but he still chose to be a vampire. So her whole, like, part in there that was focused on Louis being a forced vampire didn't work. It did work eventually because he did realize he made a bad choice and he didn't like his choice. So, like, in the long run, it still made sense, but she was wrong about that part. Lestat, however, did not choose to be a vampire. And she talked about the difference between their 2 approaches to vampiredom and why Lestat Rose is such a popular character, of the kind of character that women are gravitated towards. Like, when Interview with the Vampire came out, women were very gravitating towards Louis. They sympathized with him, and they're just like, oh, he's this very sexy, awesome, powerful vampire, but he doesn't want to be, so that makes it okay. But then when Lestat came along, they're like, actually, this is better. He was forced into be a vampire. Actually, he didn't choose it, so therefore it makes it okay. But he's actually having fun. Yes, I too would like to have fun. And that's why he rose above. Yeah. I mean, if I had the choice, I would choose it. Does that make me an unsympathetic vampire? No, I'm very sympathetic. I have feelings. Anyway. Speaking of vampires, what are we reading next? So I gave the book club the choice between 3 self-published books because, you know, I want to support indie authors. These 2 books were sent to me by the authors themselves. I normally don't like talking about books that the authors themselves sell me because I feel like very self-conscious and like, oh, no, I can't like say anything critical because I hurt your feelings. But these 2 authors aren't very like involved with me. One of them's in our Discord server but doesn't really talk much, so I'm just like, okay, there's enough distance there that I'd be okay talking about these 2. They would still probably be more gentle than I normally would. This one is an older self-published book by someone who I've never even heard of, also a man, whereas these 2 are by women. And this was the one that won, so I'm off the hook for worrying about hurting people's feelings. This book was very highly recommended to me by a very good friend of mine, one of my writing partners who I write fan fiction with. It's called The Oldest Living Vampire Tells All by Joseph Duncan. We are all Anne Rice vampire fans, right? And the Anne Rice vampires date back 6,000 years to 4000 BC, before Egypt was Egypt. Very ancient vampires. Well, you know what? This vampire? He's from 30,000 years ago. That's how he's the oldest living vampire. And this is his life story from, what is that, Neolithic times? Paleolithic? I think Neolithic is correct. Up until modern society? Yeah. And he's queer. He has, I think, both a wife and a husband. I think he's in like a polycule situation, because when you're 30,000 years old, why would you limit yourself, right? It is self-published, but it is older. And it was very successful self-published, so it is like a little bit more accessible. My friend has told me that the audiobook is amazing. It was actually the audiobook that made my friend fall in love with this. This came out in 2010 and is part of a series of how this book is a work of fiction. Any similarities to persons living or dead is entirely coincidental. Any similarities to people from 30,000 years ago is entirely coincidental. Yeah, it's not the best formatted book. It is very much a very cheap self-published book. But apparently the voice actor on the audiobook is very good. There's a preview of the audiobook on YouTube. If you want to go listen to it, just look up Oldest Living Vampire on YouTube. You can go hear it. And, you know, for someone 30,000 years ago, he is extremely white. But I think that is just the cover. No one from 30,000 years ago would be white. My legal name, where I currently reside, in the city of Liege, Belgium, in the year of 2010 AD, is Gasper Valesi. But that is not my real name. The name I was given some 30,000 years ago when I was born in Paleolithic settlement in the region that is now called Germany. The name my father gave me shortly after I was voided, bloody, and howling from my mother's womb is gone. So begins the story of the immortal Gon, a 30,000-year-old vampire. This, the first volume of his memoirs, recounts his mortal life in prehistoric Germany alongside his male companion Bruld and his two wives, the Neanderthal Ea and his Cro-Magnon mate Nyla, and details the fearsome events that lead to his transformation from man to undying monster. This revised and expanded edition includes more than 30,000 words of new material. Wow, this must have been a really short book if 30,000 of this is new. It's probably like double the length. Dang. Adding depth to much-loved characters and more fully realizing the author's vision of the oldest living vampire in the prehistoric world that gave birth to him. By turns beautiful and subversive, poetic and seductive, the oldest living vampire saga is like no other vampire series you've read. It's true, I've never read a story about a Paleolithic vampire. Not Neolithic. Paleolithic vampire. It's an old Drewer painting on the cover. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I figured it was some sort of like public domain classic art. I do like that he has like dreadlocks. I feel like that's very, you know, caveman, right? Men do love vampires. Men do. But this book was about why women love vampires. I think the reason men love vampires is different than the reason women love vampires, and it's probably in a different book. You know, as far as vampires and memories go, Anne Rice's vampires have like these perfect memories. That's why they can write books about their life stories and it's 100% accurate. And they can talk about conversations they had 200 years ago and like, yes, that was word for word the conversation. I have a magical vampire memory. But the fun thing about it is like as her series goes on, like in the later books, Lestat talks about, if my memory is correct and I'm learning more and more often that it's not, then, you know, he admits that maybe his memory isn't actually correct. So she kind of doesn't retcon, but evolves on that idea of vampires having the perfect memory and of everything a vampire saying as true. So it's not so much that like they're an unreliable narrator because they're lying. It's more just like because that's how memory works, right? Which is something the TV show tried to play with and they just did it so badly. Memory is a monster. So badly. The reason is not capes. Carmilla didn't wear a cape. Lord Ruthven didn't wear a cape. I don't even think Dracula wore a cape in the book. Bela Lugosi wore a cape. People did think Bela Lugosi was hot and his cape was hot. And I too think capes are hot. But I would like a vampire also without a cape. Lestat wore capes sometimes. He did wear capes sometimes. I don't think vampires are hot because I want them. It's because I want to be them. The book is called The Oldest Living Vampire Tells All by Joseph Duncan. And if you are in my Discord server, I posted a link to it that you can just click and find it in ebook, audiobook, and print. I would appreciate if you click that link because it's like one of those Amazon affiliate links where I get like 0.3 cents if you click it or something. Yay, 0.3 cents. It's actually a famous self-portrait of Albrecht Dürer. Oh, this is Albrecht Dürer. Hey. I doubt the vampire is supposed to be the most famous painter of his generation, but you know what? It gives the vibes, right? Like you look at this guy and you'd be like, he could be a Neolithic man. Like this portrait gives more like biblical whitewashed Jesus to me, but he does have the dreadlocks, so, right? I get it. The Byronic flavor of it all. Yes, the capes. I'd wear a cape regularly if I could get away with it. I like frock coats better, but capes are also very cool. See, the word cape never appears in Dracula. Cloak. Everyone wore cloaks back then. Cloak was a coat. Like, a cloak was what you wore when it was cold. They weren't, like, sexy. Like, a cape in the sense of what we think of as Dracula, as, like, high collar cape. It was an opera cape, right? It's what you wore when you went to the opera in high society, when you're dressing up specifically to look fancy. It was a sign of culture. It was a sign of wealth. Louis wears a cape like that in Interview with a Vampire in the Victorian era when he first meets Santino in the movie, and also he wears that kind of thing in the book too. Lestat wears capes often in the book in Interview with a Vampire. He calls it vampire drag par excellence. Vampire drag specifically he wears because it is vampire drag, and he leans into it. If he wasn't a vampire, he probably wouldn't have worn the capes, because it's just like, who wears capes? But because he was a vampire, he specifically wore capes because capes were what vampires were supposed to wear. It was like a self-fulfilling cycle of vampiriness. And Lestat just trying to troll everyone constantly, because that's what he does. He could have been the famous vampire. Yeah, maybe that was one of the lives he lived in his 30,000 years. Just how, like, Dracula 2000, Judas was the first vampire, and then became Caligula, and then became Dracula. That's a movie. Is the Count Saint Germain one too? Maybe. I mean, Count Saint Germain is always one. When Dracula's crawling down the outside of the Castle Dracula, we get his cloak spreading about him like great wings. It was very cool imagery. It is, and in most depictions of it, it is shown as a cape. But a cloak, I picture more like the Grim Reaper's cloak. Like, we've got a hood, it kind of goes around your whole body, whereas a cape is very much like popped color, satin lining, bat wings. So it depends. Vampires should be shrouded in cloaks like death, though. That image of the Grim Reaper, of death, very much goes with vampires. It's fine. I think opera capes are not as deathy, but they are very sexy. Which is why Bela Lugosi was seen as so sexy, why women threw their panties at him. Have you ever seen a Spanish language Jack that was filmed at the same time as Lugosi? I have not! That is like one of those things I need to see, and I still haven't seen it. I have not. I need to. I know. I am, like, so behind. Dracula wearing Inverness coats like Sherlock Holmes. I think that was not the style at the time. I mean, it was in London, maybe when he got to London, but hopefully not his era of the world. The oldest vampire could have hung out with Armand and Botticelli. It's true. It's true. Oh, thank you, Aranova, for the $10. You just said Lestat tried to troll everybody, and I've never heard something so accurate. Yes! It's true. I know Lestat very well. My necklace tonight is an Armand necklace, which my inner Lestat is like, about. I won this necklace at one of the Anne Rice Vampire Lestat Fan Club Vampire Ball events. I entered a raffle, and they had like a Lestat necklace, and I won the Armand necklace because, of course, I do. But it says, if I'm an angel, paint me with black wings, because Armand is the original emo kid, right? And it's got black wings on it, and is my Armand necklace. Oh, thank you, Alexa, for moderating. You can go sleep. I think we're good now. Everything's been good for a while. Thank you very much for stepping up. Have I heard the podcast submitted for the approval of the Midnight Pals? This has a Dracula episode. I've seen the Twitter of the submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. Maybe that's the same thing, and they made a podcast out of it. And Dracula is featured often on that Twitter. So were vampires in Mesopotamia? I think they were. How about Dracula wearing a deerstalker hat and carrying a pipe? You know, Holmes never had that kind of like big chunky pipe that he has, that you associate it with. He had like a long skinny pipe. It was very different aesthetic. That was a TV show thing. Have I seen Bit? No. I haven't, but I haven't seen it. And that's the one that has a trans actor in it and isn't really about transness, but trans is just there, and it's cool. But I haven't actually watched it yet. Dracula's Castle show at Universal Studios on your 10th... Oh my gosh, the Universal Studios... The Beetlejuice Rock and Review show was my childhood. So Beetlejuice Rock and Review show, Beetlejuice was the host of the show, but then all the Universal monsters came out. So there was Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, Bride of Frankenstein, and Phantom of the Opera, and maybe others. But the one thing I was just like, okay, Beetlejuice is the one thing that doesn't belong here. But he was the host, and then all the Universal ones came out and did their, like, they come out like all like classic zombie, right? And then they sort of like quick change, and all of a sudden they're wearing like rockers outfits, and the Bride of Frankenstein is wearing a mini skirt, and you know, they're all doing their rock star stuff. But the Phantom of the Opera is like the joke of the bunch, and they were just like mocking him the whole time. He was the butt of all the jokes, and I was very disappointed with that when I was 10 years old. Yeah, that really upset me. I don't know if they're still doing that Beetlejuice Rock and Review show 30 years later. I mean, he did have an opium pipe sometimes, that Sherlock Holmes. Yes, the interview with the vampire film negative and ended up being Armand's scene. Armand. You know how we always end these book clubs? We're like, we've devolved into Anne Rice talk again. This one, it was relevant because she was a relevant subject of a very large portion of this book. Anne Rice and her fans, of which I am one. Sherlock Holmes did drugs because he had ADHD and he needed stimulants to calm his brain down. Because if he wasn't constantly stimulated by working on a case, his mind would go crazy, and he needed, like, you know how Adderall is a stimulant, but it calms ADHD people down? That's what cocaine did for him. He was very much a neurodivergent person, that Sherlock Holmes, and that's why he worked. I'm sure there will be something Universal Monsters related there when you go in February. If there is, please let us know. Please tell us all about it. Yes. Oh, speaking of the Phantom of the Opera, so I got these little, like, blind bag of Universal Monsters things that have just came out. Here's the Phantom of the Opera. He's in, like, a movie chair seat. Oh, no, he dropped his rose. He's got his little, like, movie chair. And here's Dracula. He's apparently very bored with this movie they're watching. He's got his blood wine glass. His little movie chair. I love these. So Facebook ads, targeted me very much with these, and I had to get them. It's so rare when Universal Monsters merchandise actually includes the Phantom of the Opera. It's rare. He's mine. Sorry. They're not very stable. You think Sherlock Holmes also has autism in there? I mean, very likely he does, but you can't really medicate autism. It's just who you are. That's why I thought I had ADHD, right? And I wanted to get diagnosed so I could get medicated so I could, like, work better, because my work was very much suffering, which is why I haven't done vampire reviews in so long, since people ask. But it turns out I don't have ADHD. I have autism, which I've always had, obviously. And that combined with anxiety and depression produces very ADHD-like symptoms, and that's why I haven't... So I'm in therapy. I'm on medication for those things. You can't be on medication for autism, but, you know, working on it. And as soon as my brain gets fixed, I will do vampire reviews again, for anyone who's asking where my film reviews are. Isn't neurodivergency fun? Yes, the Phantom is a Universal monster. Yes, his mask does come off. And he's so sad. I'm very disappointed that he looks like Gerard Butler Phantom, who is not a Universal monster. The chair says 1943, which is the Claude Rains version of Phantom of the Opera, who did have sort of like a partial face burn like this since he got splashed with acid, but this is very obviously Gerard Butler. But yes, there are two Universal monster Phantom of the Operas. There's a 1925 Lon Chaney version. Silent film is the only silent film that is part of the Universal monster canon. You will often see Lon Chaney's Phantom of the Opera in the Universal monster lineup. But sometimes they replace him with the 1943 version, which is Claude Rains in that more like sharp full face mask instead of just like the Lon Chaney face. And that was a musical. Like, that's one of the only Phantom of the Opera movies that's actually a musical besides Phantom of the Paradise and the Gerard Butler movie. Most other Phantom of the Opera movies are not actually musicals. And he is sometimes the one that's put in the Universal Monsters lineup instead because it was a talkie. Whereas all the other Universal Monster movies, like from Dracula on, had talking. But Lon Chaney didn't, so it's kind of like... Lon Chaney is much more horrific than the Claude Rains movie. The Claude Rains Phantom of the Opera came out during World War II, like right at the end of World War II. So it was one of those World War II era escapism, splashy musical, Wizard of Oz movies where we just want to be colorful and technicolor and beautiful and have a happy ending. And the war is not really happening. We aren't committing atrocities across the sea. We aren't dropping horrible bombs on cultures. Music! That's what the 1943 Claude Rains movie is. So it's not really a horror film the same way all the other Universal monsters are. So I think Lon Chaney does fit better in it as far as the pantheon goes, but as far as like timing goes, yeah. Lon Chaney was the first Universal monster. I mean, Hunchback I think came before Phantom, but he's never included in Universal Monsters lineup. Lon Chaney's Hunchback, so Phantom was first. Anyone who's great but quirky is definitely some kind of neurodivergent. Ursula K. Le Guin wrote an interesting short story, which the percentages of those who are autistic are not are reversed. It's a non-autistic who show up in us. I mean, they should, right? Things that people see as weird are what makes people outcast from society. Like, if we just accepted that everyone's kind of weird, we wouldn't be so judgy all the time. I mean, autistic people can be very annoying. I know this because I am often very annoying. I talk too much. I don't know when to stop. I interrupt people when I shouldn't interrupt them. I'm not the kind of person who will just keep talking and can't see the social cues of like, oh, I should shut up now. No, I'm very too much self-conscious and already think everyone hates me. So at least I'm not annoying in that sense. But I am over the top a lot. And I realized later that, oh, that person probably didn't want to hear all that. So imagine if everyone was like that and it was only the people who weren't annoying who were the outcasts. I don't see that being a thing. You can find the same people who have the same obsessions as you, who want to listen to you go on and on. Yes, that is what fandom is. That is what fandom is. And, you know, autistic people often feel very outcast from society, so we gravitate towards things like vampires, or fandom in general, nerdery in general, right? Attracts the outcasts, attracts the people who don't fit in with polite society, who will go to a dinner party and nobody wants to talk to them because they're the annoying ones, so they go online and talk to their online friends. But vampires especially, because vampires are inherently outcasts, so we vibe. Especially a lot of queer autistic people. Especially queer autistic people. It's like the vampire double whammy right there, right? Phantom attracts outcasts, exactly. There's like two sides to Phantom, right? There's the people who see it as, oh, Raoul's the hero and he saves Christine and they live happily ever after. Those are the people like in oldie times who read the book and like, oh, the Phantom was sad and I felt sorry for him because he learned his lesson in the end. He wasn't just a mustache twirling evil like Dracula was. But they don't ship it, right? The people who ship it, the fans, yeah, we're the weird ones. Maybe I'm weird, but I enjoy listening to someone rambling about a subject I know well, especially if I don't know anything about it. You're not weird, you're just not the norm, I guess. A lot of people are they're not self-focused in that this person's talking about themselves too much. I wish they would talk about me, but more just like, this person doesn't care about me at all, that they're just talking about themselves and their own interests so much that they don't care about me or hearing anything from me or learning anything about me, so therefore I feel insecure, and therefore I feel like an outcast, and I feel like unloved and rejected here because this person just clearly doesn't care about me at all. So I get it from both sides, you know? I understand it from both sides, that is. You just have to make the person you're talking to feel valued. That's all that matters. If they enjoy hearing you ramble on about your stuff, yeah, sure, ramble on, but just make sure they're okay. Make sure they don't feel like neglected. If it's someone you have like a level of trust with and a level of like understanding with, sure, like I can listen to one of my besties ramble on forever. I don't care if they ask me how my day was. That's fine. Like, I know we're cool. But if it's someone who you're meeting for the first time, if it's your very first introduction to that person, and they will only talk about themselves and what they're interested in and don't perceive you as a person at all, don't have interest in you, you're not going to feel special or important to that person at all. Maybe they're fascinating to you. Maybe you're just interested and you don't care about being seen by them. Maybe you have that level of self-confidence. That's fine. But in as far as like making friends and finding people that you can connect with, you're not going to connect with a person who has zero interest in you. That's why, as a person with that inclination, I always try to remind myself to let people talk about themselves. Because if I ask them questions and let them talk about themselves, then they will feel good and that'll make them like me better. And then we can get on some kind of like equal footing in the future. It's a strategy. I've gone through phases of hiding my love for vampires. People make you feel weird about it. I mean, like, certain people like, oh, vampires are satanic. What, you like vampires? Does that mean you're evil and you like to eat people? Ugh. So you think being a vampire is okay? There are people like that in the world. I don't think that's the norm. Depends on your culture, depends on your society, depends on the people around you. You know, maybe at church you don't want to tell people, yeah, I super love vampires. But, you know, in high school, I'm sure you could say it and people would be cool with it. It depends on your environment, right? If you live in not America, I'm sure it's very different. I'm sure it's different in the Middle East. I'm sure it's different in Asia. Like, there's different cultures where that might be a, you know, a taboo topic. So, yeah. Being into alternative lifestyles is private. Like, if I told people I was into vampires, my fear is that they would assume, oh, you're a sexual deviant, you're a slut, you're into Satan, you're, you know, these things that would make them degrade me and judge me personally. Not that there's anything wrong with being slutty or a sexual deviant or into Satan. Obviously, that's fine. You do you. But knowing that people are thinking things about me that aren't true, because I'm not a slut, I'm very prudish, and then judging me for it and disliking me for it, where I can't be like, no, that's not true, that's not me at all, because then I'm like slut shaming other people and I can't do that, so I'm like stuck in this hard place, and it's like upsetting, it is traumatizing, you don't want to deal with it, so you don't admit it, and you don't say those things out loud, and you're just like, oh yeah, you know, whatever. I like normal things, like crafting. I do like crafting. You know, you just say what's safe, right? Got satanic panic by a church board game night for bringing Talisman, which has oh my god, that's like the church people who were like, Harry Potter is satanic because it has witchcraft. It's like, lady, do you know who J.K. Rowling is? Right? Do I sew? No, I don't really sew. I do paper crafts, junk journaling, scrapbooking, dimensional paper crafts, shadow boxes, those kind of things. I made all those like coffins with the quotes in them. I was really proud of making those kind of crafts, sort of like composite multimedia crafts kind of thing. Grown men will lose their shit when sports teams loses. You know, a lot of people would be like, nerds get ostracized for being into fandom, and oh, I'm such a nerd because I like Star Trek, but you like sports and you're into football and you'll do this, so you like wear face paint and go to the game and get all upset about it. It's not the same. It's a false equivalency. It's entirely a false equivalency. I mean, there are people who will build their identities around sports teams, but most sports fans will turn it off, right? Whereas most like fans, like the autistic nerd fans, it is their life. Vampire Chronicles is my life. Lestat is my life. This is like my existence, right? Literally, every time I mention vampires are my special interest in a relevant setting, I get weird looks because people think it's sexual. I mean, it's true. And not that there's anything wrong with being sexual, but it's awkward, right? It's awkward, especially because I'm not a sexual person. Like, if I was, like, super sexually active, I might be like, heck yeah, you want some? You know, I'd own it. But just the fact that it's not true about me makes me feel like, oh, you don't get it. But if I explain why you don't get it, then you'll get the wrong idea. And it's just like, it's so awkward. Tabletop role-playing games are way cooler by comparison. Speaking of which, I have a D&D session tomorrow. I am playing Curse of Strahd, which I've been playing for years now, on and off. It'll always be like something like COVID happened, then we had to stop for 2 years, and then we got a new DM, and then one of the players had a baby, so she had to stop for a year. Now we're back to it, so we're still playing Curse of Strahd, and we are having a first meeting in a while tomorrow. I'm excited to get back into that D&D game. A really sexual vampire like Graf Orlok. Heck yeah. Orlok's hot. He can get it. Monster fuckers unite, right? I love you guys. I'm so great with friends. 10:30. Oh, we've been going for 2 hours. I thought it was later than that. Have I ever had a special interest / obsession that I completely abandoned later? I guess I was obsessed with pigs for a while. Just, I thought piggies were really cute, and I used to collect pigs. I had this whole pig collection of little, like, pig stuffies and pig trinkets and pig, you know, figurines, stickers. My zodiac animal is the pig in Chinese zodiac, but I don't think that's why I was into. I just thought piggies were really cute, like little baby piggies. I'm not into pigs anymore. Definitely that is in my past. I still have that pig collection because I can't throw anything away because I'm that kind of obsessive collector. But I would not display them in my home. I would not show those pigs off. I mean, I would open up the box and be like, I want to see some cute pigs, but I'm not, like, I don't see a pig and have to buy it anymore. Not at all. Where do I keep my sticker collection? In my sticker folders, of which I have multiple. So I do have my Lisa Frank sticker collection, which I still have from the 90s, which I keep in. I have a lot of boxes that are shaped like books because I love boxes that are shaped like books. So I keep a lot of things hidden on my, like, gothic bookshelves, and these boxes shaped like books, and then you open up and it's like a Lisa Frank sticker collection. But I have so many stickers now because I've joined these sort of like scrapbooking supply of the month clubs in the past couple months. No, many stickers. So I have my book of, like, very classy, vintage, Victorian, beautiful scrapbooking. I can make art with these stickers. I have my book of gothic, Halloweeny, anything dark and spooky things stickers. I have my book of these stickers are more cutesy. I wouldn't use in the scrapbook, but I have them. They're in my collection. They're more childish. They're more cutesy. And then I have my book of, you know, Christmas theme or this theme or that theme, you know, very sort of specific genre stickers. And then I have my box full of stickers that are too big to fit in those books. And then I have my rolls full of washi tapes. I have an entire box full of washi tapes. And then I have a box full of all the stickers that are in, like, folios that can't fit in my, like, slidey book, that are in, like, sort of like you peel them off with tweezers. And then I have lots of books that are like, these are books of stickers. They're like physical, like, books. They're kind of around the house. They're like part of the decor. The world is divided into collectors and non-collectors. I don't understand people who don't collect anything. How can that be? I don't know. They have different hobbies than we do, Dave. Who knows what they are? Maybe they cook. You thought this was a pre-recorded video? Never! If you see me sitting in this chair in front of this backdrop, it is never pre-recorded. If you see me sitting in that chair in front of that backdrop, it is pre-recorded. Can't see that chair. Can I make my camera go over there? Over there. Over there. Over there. No, that's as far as it'll go. Nope, sorry. At least you don't get to see my mess. There's a huge mess over there. Suspect people who don't collect anything just don't have it. Maybe they just sit and watch TV all day. Maybe they do crossword puzzles. I like crossword puzzles. I look even better with my neck exposed. When is my neck not exposed? I don't wear turtlenecks. I'm not James Somerton. Yes, yes, Bram Stoker's Dracula is sexy, I know. You know what? A lot of Dracula fans hate the 1992 Bram Stoker's Dracula movie by Francis Ford Coppola starring Gary Oldman and Winona Ryder because it is so different from the Dracula book. It makes Dracula into this sad, romantic, tortured soul, which he is not in the book. It makes Mina love him, which she did not in the book. And a lot of people are upset by that. But a lot of people do look at this, like, Death in the Maiden romance and find it very sexy and attractive if they don't really care what Dracula should be. They like this movie because it is hot to them. However, to me, Gary Oldman is not an attractive person in any way whatsoever. He looks like he is a melting wax candle to me. And I just see this, like, melting wax candle of a human dressed up in clothes, and I'm supposed to think he's sexy. Not that, like, looks matter to me, right? I'm obsessed with Phantom of the Opera. That is the most sexiest man to me, but he's just, like, anti-attractive to me. Not that he's a bad actor. He's a brilliant actor. Him as Dracula is just, like, gross to me. In that he's supposed to be attractive and sexy. Like, why does this girl like him? Like, I don't get the appeal. Just not my type. Thank you. No. I was like, okay, they cast this, like, really dweeby person, and I'm supposed to believe he's, like, super seductive. No, I don't get it. But people watch that movie, and they do think he's super hot, and I'm like, okay, tastes, whatever. But that movie never did it for me. And I would have been here for let's do Dracula, but instead it's romantic. Let's make Dracula into Phantom of the Opera. Of course I would have been here for that, but he was just not the actor to do it for me, apparently. Every time do I hit my desk, does it make a loud noise? Sorry. Van Helsing is hot because he was Anthony Hopkins. That's because people think Hannibal's hot. I was like, I get why Hannibal's cool. I get why he's conceptually hot, but Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal is not sexy to me. Meanwhile, I think the Phantom of the Opera is sexy, and he's a hideous, like, goblin sewer gremlin, so, you know, it's not about looks. It's about, like, energy. It's about, like, presence. It's about gravitas. What if the Phantom was a vampire? That book has been written. Multiple books of that have been written. I don't think he needs it. He is amazing enough without being a vampire. I would like him to live forever. That would be great, instead of dying at the end of the book. Yes, if he could be a vampire just to live forever, but I wouldn't want the being a vampire to make him, like, even cooler, even more powerful, even more seductive. He doesn't need it. He's fine the way he is. Just give him immortality. That's all I want. And he can drink blood too, because, you know. The Japanese version of Wildhorn's Dracula is... You know what? The Japanese will take really mediocre musicals like Wildhorn's Dracula or Jetson Kopit's Phantom and make it amazing. They have that power. It's true, especially if they do it with an all-female cast of Takazura stuff. Oh, so good. Yes, Frank Wildhorn's musical is very much trying to make Dracula romantic. I was reading an interview in the playbill from the actress who's playing Mina in that musical, and she's like, oh, have you read chapter X and Y about where Dracula, and he's forcing Mina to drink out of his chest, and it's the sexiest thing I've ever read in literature. And I'm like, lady, have you actually read that chapter? It is not in any way framed in any way erotic or sexy or romantic. It is just like assholery top to bottom. There's nothing sexy about this asshole just being a dick, and not even like ooh, this is my kink kind of way. Like, no, there's nothing sexy about this scene. Like, you are trying so hard, ma'am. Who would I cast as appealing and attractive Dracula in 2023? You think I know who people are? I don't know actors. I don't know humans. I know characters. I know stories. I do not know humans. I do not. I think the version we did is basically an English translation of the Austrian German version. Austrian-German version of what? An English translation of the Austrian-German version of Wildhorn? Why wouldn't you just do the original English of Wildhorn? Eric versus Louis. Oh my god, I have written that fanfic. Eric versus Louis. I have written that fanfic. You guys, I was really stressed this week because I had to finish reading this book. Oh my god, I've gotten like all... You know how like movies when it's like, we zoom out to make you look small because you're vulnerable right now? That's what it did. I was stressed because I had to finish this book, and I was like, it's short, I can finish it pretty quickly, but oh, it's very dense and academic, maybe I can't. And I had to film a video about my books because I'm leaving Sunday. Okay, Sunday morning I am singing a cantata at church. It's our big Christmas concert, and then immediately after singing that, I'm getting in the car and I'm driving to Georgia to see my family, from which I will fly to California to see my other family, and I will not be back until January 1st. So I had to get my videos done before the 31st because that's how Patreon works, right? So I knew I had to finish reading this to do book club for you. I had to film this video. I had to film my video about Swan Song, which I did, which is up on my Patreon. For those of you who are my members, you have already watched it, I'm sure. And I get this all done by today because I'm playing D&D tomorrow, and I won't be able to do things tomorrow. And also, because we're leaving town on Sunday, right after my choir performance, and I have a huge, like, tech rehearsal for choir tomorrow, we have to have our, like, family Christmas with Paul and the Spawn tomorrow at some point, and also play D&D with our friends that we haven't seen in a year, so it's, like, so much going on. But I did it! I succeeded! I was like, okay, I will either film this video today or finish this book today. I won't be able to do both. Maybe I'll finish the book tomorrow between D&D. Maybe I can read it while we're playing, and then I can do Vampire Book Club. No, but I did it, and I'm here tonight with you, and I'm very proud of myself, and I didn't. I'm so relieved. Thank you for being here with me. Do you have a Death in the Maiden book or movie or anime you'd recommend? Not really. Because the reason I wanted to write my book, The Company of Death, was because there were no death stories out there that I actually liked, that I actually wanted. Like, the Death in the Maiden I do like is, like, a picture of art or a song or something. There's no, like, actual narrative plot story about death that fit my needs. The Death in the Maiden story I would recommend is Phantom of the Opera. Like, that's the one, right? Oh, you're singing a citywide church concert tomorrow? Congratulations. I had my huge, like, my church choir is pretty small. And we're singing, like, a Celtic Irish Christmas cantata, which is really fun. But last weekend, I had my huge choir performance. I am part of the Charlotte One Voice Choir, which is the gay and lesbian and everything else choir of Charlotte. And we sang this huge holiday concert called Pride and Joy. And it was a lot of a cappella music. It was a lot of really complicated music. There were Christmas, like, holy songs, and there were really secular songs. There were, like, solstice Wicca songs. There were just, like, traditional, like, non-denominational songs. And we have an 85-person choir, and it was this huge show, and we had to be off-book, which means we had to memorize everything, and a lot of these songs were very complicated. And I sing first soprano, which is usually the easiest part because you're singing the melody, but a lot of the times the sopranos weren't singing the melody. This was that much harder. I also had sort of like a sectional part where I was off separately that I had to memorize, and a lot of it wasn't even words. You were just singing like mouth noises. It's a very challenging choir concert, but we did it, and it was amazing, and it came out even better than we thought it would, and we had sold out concerts for all 3 shows. And in it, we were doing fundraising for scholarships for the gay choir for anybody who, like, need to join but couldn't afford it, and for raising money to go to the gay choir symposium this summer and stuff. And it was a really great show, and I was very proud of it. And I mean, Paul came and he brought the kids, but, like, no one else I know came. Maybe because the show sold out so fast, but it's sort of like sad to be part of such a big, amazing show, but there's no one in the audience, you know, that's there for you. I was a little disappointed. I had invited my mom to come. She lives in Florida, so it's a trip for her, and she was going to, but then she sold her house and she had to move literally that weekend, so she couldn't come, and it's just like, well, they did record it, but because it's all like copyrighted music, I can't actually share the recording, but it's there for posterity at least. But I love that choir. It's an amazing community. A lot of people who sing there, it's like the only place we can be openly gay with each other and like have that safe space So it's great to be part of, and great to be like there to give that to other people who maybe don't have as much privilege as I do. So it's cool. What are you talking about? Discworld death. I wouldn't call Discworld death a death in the Maiden. Like, there are maidens there, but, like, Death's relationship with the women aren't Death and the Maiden relationships. Like, he doesn't serve that position with them. He is a very defanged, soft Death when it comes to his relationships with any maiden-like characters. So, I had not read Discworld before I wrote my novel and came up with my idea of, like, there is no Death in the Maiden story that exists that satisfied my needs. I had read Masquerade, right? And Death is in it because he's in every single one of Terry Pratchett's books. But he's very minor in that I didn't get a sense of his character or anything. So I wrote my book. I came up with the whole plot for all 3 books. And then I let myself read and, like, watch the cartoon versions and the live-action versions of Discworld. So now I understand Discworld Death, and, like, I'm very familiar with him. I didn't read the whole canon, but I read all the Death books, right? So he definitely serves Death motifs, but not Death in the Maiden motifs, I would say, at all. Discworld is very... I mean, it does have female characters. It does have good female characters and strong female characters. Female characters that aren't, like, cliche young ladies. Like, there's a lot of older female characters, and that's great, but when it comes to Death, it's not, like, it's a man's world with him, pretty much. And a lot, like, one of my book clubs was going to be like, let's read a Terry Pratchett book to start ourselves off for people who've never read it before, and they pick Small Gods. I'm like, there's not a single woman in this entire book. Where are the women in this book? This is just, not that Terry Pratchett was sexist or anything, but I'm just like, the point of Death in the Maiden is that it's very female-driven. It is very woman-focused. It's very much about the woman's desires. It's very much about the woman's needs being fulfilled and her dreams being fulfilled. And then the disillusionment of it, the gothic aspect of it, the darkness of it, the horror of it. And that's not there in Discworld Death. At least not in a way that satisfied me. But he is great, and you should read him, and he's amazing, and I love him. Do I plan on doing any videos on vampirism in D&D? Asking for a video on Astarion. I've never played Baldur's Gate. Was there a 1 and 2 before 3? I don't even know. My friend Nella is super into it, and I've heard a lot of it through her, as well as people on my Discord server talk about Astarion all the time. But mostly I've heard from Nella, and I feel like I've gotten, like, the beginner's crash course in Astarion. And I asked Paul if we wanted to play Baldur's Gate 3 for our new Let's Play series, because we have finished Vampire the Masquerade Swansong. And he says it's too long and involved to play for a Let's Play series, that we'd be playing it for 18 years. Since we only play 1 hour a month. It's a very slow series, because I don't want to charge my Patreons more than that. I mean, if they told me they were willing to pay for it, I would, but... I would have to get their permission first. So I don't know that playing through it in that sense would work. And I'm not the kind of person who plays games for a hobby as a fun. I don't watch TV for a hobby as a fun. I don't watch movies for a hobby as fun. I barely even read books for a hobby as a fun anymore. Except unless it's for one of my 3 book clubs. Like, my hobby for fun is writing fan fiction and role-playing and fandom with my friends. So... sitting and playing a video game would cut into my fan fiction time. So doing it would be intentional work for me. And I don't know that playing 18 years worth of hours of video game would be worth it to make one video out of and make $400 off of, because I make $400 per video, just so you know. I don't know that, like, the time versus cost would be worth it for a game like that. That's my answer. I don't know. Is Swansong fun to play? I liked it. It grew on me. I got into it. Paul was, like, really negative through all of it. There were parts of it that really frustrated me. Watch my series on Swansong. You can see my whole experience. It's there on YouTube. Have I seen Saltburn? No. I should play VTM Redemption. Should I? Should I really? Is that what I should do? Are you sure that's what I should do? I've heard things. I mentioned that to Paul. He mentioned it too, but he says he's heard it's horrible. And I know it's like it has problems and stuff. I don't care about like technical issues, but like emotionally, is it horrible? You hope I'll play Vampire someday? It's not as bad as people. I mean, if no one else gives me a strong reason to play anything else next, that is the one that we will choose to play next because we own it. Because we got it when it was on sale, so we have it. You played Redemption recently and loved it. Interesting. One of the classic Castlevania games. I've heard the classic Castlevania games are very, very hard. I'm much more interested in games that explore vampires in society the way that the Vampire the Masquerade games do. So I don't know that the Castlevania games do that. I don't know that I would have much critical social analysis to give about those games as I play it, which is the point of playing the games. I'm not just playing it to be like, this game is fun and cool to play. Not that there's anything wrong with enjoying games for that reason, but as a video making person, I'm doing it to talk about the way vampires are used in existence, right? I don't know that Castlevania would provide that. All I know about Castlevania is what I said in my video about the Castlevania season 1 of the TV series. That is 100% of what I know about Castlevania. So anything beyond that, you would have to tell me. Blood Omen Legacy of Kain. I don't know anything about the... I mean, I've heard the name. I've seen the fan art, but I don't know anything about it. Booted up Rondo of Blood and died immediately 5 times straight into triple. I've heard it's very hard. I had a friend 20 years ago, maybe, who was obsessed with Legacy of Kain. Maybe 15, I don't know. What is time? And she used to draw a lot of fan art for it. Maybe I think of Blood Rain. No, I'm thinking of Blood Rain. Sorry. Legacy of Kain is completely different. Yes, you mentioned Blood Rain. There we go. Brinkwood, I've never heard of that. Okay, what I need, friends, is a game that will get people to click on my channel and be like, this looks interesting, I want to click. Because what my channel needs is clicks. Because I have 30,000 subscribers on, no, 57,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is great. That's amazing. That's so many subscribers. My videos get like 800 views. And I get that Let's Plays of vampire video games are not for all of my 30,000 subscribers, but I think it would be for more than 800. YouTube does not favor me. And anything that will help me defy the algorithm and get attention is great for me. So, yeah, you know, something that will make people be like, this looks interesting, I want to click it. That's what I'm looking for mostly. I don't care if it's bad, because bad things are fun to talk about. I just care if it's interesting. If I have things to talk about at all, right? Dracula the Redemption, Dracula the Sanctuary, and Dracula Blood of the Dragon. Interesting. Right, that's what I thought. I thought Baldur's Gate would be great for views. I really thought that, but Paul's like, no, it takes too long. Do you know how long that takes? We'd be here forever. We can't just do that. It'll take us like a year to get through the first scene. I don't know. Brinkwood is a game where the bad guys are vampires, and you're playing as a rebel faction against your vampire overlords. So maybe not exactly your thing, but it was fun when we did it. I mean, fun is fun. Skyrim's first expansion. Lindsay, my bestie Lindsay, was obsessed with Skyrim and into the vampires there. And so all of my knowledge of that exists from, you know, when we lived together and I used to watch her play it. Oh, I know Baldur's Gate 3 has a vampire story. I know very well. My friend Nella is obsessed with it and tells me much of the story where you are the Tav character and Astarion is your boyfriend. I've heard much of that. It's Maine if you make it Maine. I've also been told that you can play as Astarion. Is that true? Can you actually play as him? V Rising comes out early access in 2020. Interesting. Dracula Unleashed. Huh. Wait, is that the one I have? I have a Dracula 9. Okay, wait here. I'm gonna go look. I hope my camera doesn't follow me so you don't see my mess. No. Okay. It's Dracula Resurrection. Inspired by the novel Bram Stoker's Dracula, which I think was really inspired by the movie Bram Stoker's Dracula. Have any of you played this game? I've had it for years. It's very much like Keanu Reeves as Jonathan situation. It is for Windows 95, 98, ME, or XP. So I got this game years ago, back when I actually had Windows 98 or whatever. And I started playing it, and it instantly made me nauseous. What are you doing, camera? What are you doing? No one wants to see that. No one wants you to zoom out. Instantly made me nauseous just from like the camera movement. You know, I'm a very sensitive flower of a person, so anything, you know, I bruise like a peach. So, I stopped. I couldn't even make it through the first, like, solve the puzzle to escape this room. It is full 360-degree panoramic viewing, mature 17+ animated violence, mature sexual themes. So Paul thinks we should play this game. Like, look at this. Look at the graphics there. Look at those graphics. I'm looking for a date for when this came out. He thinks this is what we should play next. Do you think this would get clicks? Do I enjoy Blade and Underworld movies? Concept-wise about vampires and other more... I mean, they're fine, but they're not my aesthetic at all. That's what Blood Rain is, right? Blade style. Look. Look. Oh, it's from 2000. Okay. I don't know if I got it. I must have been after 2000 I got it, because I graduated high school in 2001. And I'm sure I didn't get this when I was in high school. I didn't have money when I was in high school. It had to be after I was in college. I started college in 2001 till 2005. So it must have been at some point there that and I think I found it on like a discount bargain rack. So I think it must have been like out for a few years already. It was made in Canada. Oh, you weren't here? Next month's book club book, which we have already discussed extensively. The Oldest Living Vampire Tells All by Joseph Duncan. I put a link to it in the Discord server in the book club suggestions. You can click that and find it easily. It is an audiobook, and I've heard the audiobook is amazing. Underworld overdid itself, got to a point where it became boring. I mean, it was a thing. It was a style. It was an aesthetic. I like that it was female focused. I really like that part. I just turned 40. We are the same age. Yes, we are. I turned 40 earlier this year. So that means I'm older than you. My birthday's in May 1st. Year of the pig, right? That's why I collected pigs. We're both Year of the pig. Should I play this game next or just not at all? That's your first question. If the answer is not at all, then we move on to the second question. We're all elder millennials, right? Like, just not quite old enough to be Gen X, but millennials. Like, we actually grew up on the internet, whereas Gen X didn't. The in-between generation. They call us Zennials. Like, Xennials. Yeah, I don't identify with Gen X at all. Like, some people would say, no, you're technically Gen X, but I am not. I was raised on the internet. People in Gen X were not. That's, like, the difference between us, right? Like, I got the internet at 14. And my existence changed from a physical existence to a cyber existence. And from 14 on, my entire social life was on the internet. And I think that's very different in like personality and like brain functioning compared to how Gen X was raised without the internet at such a formative age. Started college in 2003. So you skipped a few years, had some gap years. I started college in 2001 in New York City, in the financial district at Pace University, about 5 blocks away from the World Trade Center. I started the last week of August. So like 2 weeks into the semester, September 11th happens, close enough that I'm watching it with my eyes from the windows. That was my welcome to New York, welcome to college freshman year. They evacuated us to my college had another campus up in Westchester, and we spent a few weeks up there just kind of chilling, not learning, not doing anything, not going to classes. And they shipped us back down to Manhattan once like it was cleared out. That was my freshman year of college. Welcome to New York. Yeah, if you had laid the World Trade Center down on its side, the top of it would have touched the front steps of my college building. And my dorm was in the college building. Like in New York City, you just live in a giant building. There's no like campus, right? So yeah. You were 4 in 2001. Okay, child. I'm so happy you guys are here. I'm just feeling so relaxed and so relieved. I was like, I did it. I filmed my video. I finished this book. I talked to you about this book. I could talk so much more about this book. You know, I should take notes when I read books, or at least like leave sticky notes in it. I started taking pictures of the pages. I was just like, oh my God, I have to show these to my fandom fans. This is dirt about Anne Rice fandom. Oh my God, did you know Anne Rice said this? There's so much shade, so much shady in this book. If you're an Anne Rice fandom, you gotta read this book. What did I study in college? There were not any vampire courses when I was in college. Nope. There were women in literature courses. There were feminism literature courses, which I did take. I studied musical theater. I was a theater major with a music minor. That's what I studied in college. And I have a bachelor's degree in theater with a minor in music. Vampire studies was not really a thing yet in 2001. At least not in New York. I know there's like a whole vampire studies course in a college that's in the Southwest in like Arizona or Nevada or something. And I know it's spread around since then, but I think that's where it like first really started getting off the ground, but definitely not where I was going to school. Yes, there are tons of vampire courses now. And courses, you know, I spoke to a professor of a vampire course who teaches a course down in Florida, and she invited me to be a guest speaker for her class. And then COVID happened and we didn't wind up doing it. I never heard from her in a while, but like she teaches a vampire course and she's like, could you come give a guest lecture on Anne Rice? And I'm like, heck yeah, I could, please. And I would have done that. I could be the vampire course. Watch my channel. My channel is vampire courses. Love to have a PhD in vampires. You know, I feel like I have an unofficial PhD in vampires at this point. Like if you took all of my video essays about vampire movies and books and compiled them into one like thesis, it would earn a PhD, right? Maybe if I cited my sources better. I always like mention my sources in the video. I'm like, so-and-so said this from this article says this, but I don't actually like list them in a bibliography, which I've always been pretty bad at. I'm too old for that now. I need to be better at that. Master's degree in vampirism. Yep. Video home doctorate. Yes, there we go. Vampire home doctorate. I think people who get degrees in vampire studies are literature majors or media studies majors with like specialization in vampires. Muggle studies. But the opposite, right? It's 11 o'clock. I gotta play D&D tomorrow, guys. I got choir practice in the morning. We have tech rehearsal for our big show. So I'm going to let you go. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for hanging out with me. Thank you for talking about this really nerdy book about gender and politics and feminism and fandom with me. This was such a delight to read. I'm so glad you chose it, even though I was resistant towards it. And I'm very excited to read this book because my friend who recommended it has been begging me to try to get you guys to read it for years now. And she's actually the one who sent me this copy because she's like, maybe if I send it to you, till read. And I put it up for a vote a while back and you guys didn't vote for it. But this time you voted for it overwhelmingly. You really chose this book. So I'm excited to read it and see what all the fuss is about. My friend says you should all listen to the audiobook because it is amazing. So I've passed that on. Trust my friend. She is very smart. You can join the Vampire Book Club on my Discord server. It is free. It is open to everyone to join. You do have to select to join it. You won't see it unless you select to join it. If you are new to my Discord server, you will follow the rules. You do the onboarding. You'll get initiated. Everything's fine. If you are already in my Discord server, you have to go through the onboarding now. It's different. We just changed things. And if you haven't done it, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to do it. Go to the rules channel and I'll walk you through it. If you go on my Discord server and you look at your roles and you thought you were in the book club but you're not purple, then you are not in the book club anymore. You need to re-enroll in the book club. Please do it. There are 1,000 members in my server, but only like 80 people have done it. And I'm like, okay, technically we're an 80-person server, and that's how many people are actually active, which is fine. You guys are the best. You 80 people are my favorite. But I don't want anyone to miss out on the chance just because they didn't get the memo. So please go to the rules channel in my Discord server, follow the rules, click the buttons, and you're fine. You're back on board. Read The Oldest Living Vampire Tells All. You can find on Amazon or anywhere else. Oh, thank you, Just a Stranger, with a playlist for you for the New Zealand $2. Sleep well. Thank you for the stream. Thank you, Just a Stranger. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Winter solstice. I will do a live stream about this around January 13th, always around the middle of the month. 13 is my lucky number. That is when we switch to a new book, but it might not be exactly when I do the live stream, depending on what day of the week it is, if I have choir practice or not, if I'm playing D&D or not. I have a life. I do things. I usually try not to stream on the weekends just because the viewership is lower, but you know, we'll see how it is. So probably on a Monday, Tuesday, or Friday, since the other days are my D&D or choir practice days. Join my Discord server. Join my Patreon. If you want to support the book club, like the wonderful people who give me super chats here, thank you so much. You can also support by joining my Patreon. You will not pay for the book club exactly, but your Patreon contributions will go toward the book club. You know, it all goes into the same pot, basically. But I'm looking forward to reading this and talking to you about it. And I hope you all have a happy holidays, have some good vampire reading over the holidays. And we'll all meet again after the holidays. Look out for my video that I filmed today, which I haven't edited yet, but will be going up within a few days for my patrons, and then probably next week for everyone else on YouTube. And you can see all the new vampire books I got in my collection. I got some cool games. I got some more vampire, like, t-shirts. It's amazing. You're going to see all this cool stuff I got. And it's not even Christmas yet. I haven't even gotten Christmas. Well, some of them were early Christmas presents. But yeah, it's exciting. And I hope you will enjoy it. Until then, good night. I love you. Merry Vampmas.